everybody, I'm Josh Welgus.
I'm Spooky Cat.
I'm Anthony LeTourneau.
And this is the Halloween special of CTGTV. Hey everybody, again, welcome back to CTGTV. This is our October edition, and so for that we are doing kind of a Halloween-themed special. You can see I'm wearing very spooky headgear, as are all of us, really, here.
I'm just spooky.
In general, yeah.
I'm the spooky cat.
And I've got this bird. I don't know why.
It's too many bones.
Way too many bones.
Exactly. Happy Halloween. Or something. Anyway, we are here. We're going to go ahead and we've got Anthony LeTourneau. You've seen him, all over the place on a lot of our other videos. He is our resident artist, and we thought it would be fun to open up this month's CTGTV to have him in and talk about, I think, what is probably the spookiest art that we have ever done, the darkest art that we have ever done for any of our games, and that would be Too Many Bones, Splice Dice.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you look through the baddies to the tyrants, everything in there, everything has a decidedly kind of darker, grimier, grosser vibe to it. So, and then we also, we did something kind of unique as a part of that Kickstarter campaign. With each day, we put you on the spot. We had a community vote, and the theme being splicing and dicing things together, dicing things up, splicing them together. We were combining two existing baddies from the Too Many Bones universe each and every day, and you were drawing those on the fly. Yeah. So I just wanted to pick your brain. We wanted to pick your brain a little bit just about that process and just how it all came together as a cohesive package. So
so drawing those, like, hard, easy. How, did it come? Like, was it really challenging?
It was nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing. I thought this was going to be a public apology.
Yes.
No, it was really, really hard. The hardest part was not designing them. The hardest part was knowing that design was going to be in the game.
Sure.
Normally
no redos, no takebacks.
Normally you do redos and takebacks and several processes to get to an in-the-game monster. Where this was hours. Like I think I would get by like maybe 10 o'clock in the morning something that would be delivered at the end of the day, and so it was it was difficult.
I would that whole thing for the campaign I believe was my idea. I don't know. It was one of our ideas. Whoever it was, I will, on behalf of both of us, I will publicly apologize to you for that. Hopefully you're happy with all the pieces that ended up in the game, because
when I show people, that's the stuff I am most proud of, which is, it's so bizarre because it was the highest bar for me to attain to, but I think it was actually some of the tighter stuff I've done.
Yeah, we kind of did it with encounters too, or the scenarios, like where they're picking different choices, and then Ryan was editing on the fly for the next day, and so like we kind of did it both. We put everyone through their paces on that. On that, but
Kickstarter campaigns are always like that.
Well, you were writing stuff for Undertow under the same type of deadline.
Yes. I don't want to go back to that. That was a dark place.
Hello. Is anybody out there? Is anybody out there? Anybody? Hello.
So
spooky place.
Yeah, very spooky. Yeah, one of the spookiest times of my whole life, I would say.
Right.
Let's go back though to the overall aesthetic of the game, the whole like laboratory, surgical, dark tone. As you were taking a look at things like the cover art didn't end up being that image of Nobulus pouring the test tube into like whatever the baddie being cut open. But how do you start approaching that from a tonal standpoint as an artist?
Yeah, well, so much of that is informed by the brief. So I knew that the tone of the project was going to be that dark. We have Nobulus's lab. Now we're going to be splicing baddies. So automatically you kind of know which vibe you got to get into. But then so much of art design is informed from other sources. So I literally would go back to Frankenstein's lab from the
Yeah.
1930s and 40s, that type of movie, and just kind of as kitschy as that is, I would use some of that to inform where I was going to go with character design.
Yeah, it definitely had the mad scientist
Yeah,
feel
yeah,
inside there,
yeah.
and that tank and everything. It was cool because, he wasn't featured there. It was the interns, but they were almost just caught up in a situation
Yes,
that they
yes.
were experiencing.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that mad scientist can go a couple different directions. You can go real crazy, wild hair, bloodshot eyes, that whole bit, or you can go subtle, dark. And I think Splice and Dice went into that direction where it was dark but subtle dark. It wasn't
Yep.
exaggerated,
Right.
which actually kind of speaks to darkerness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Right before it's funny that we're talking about this. Right before I came out here, I was rewatching the Shut Up and Sit Down review of Too Many Bones. I don't remember how it ended up on my computer, but I was watching it again, and one of the things that Quinn's talks a lot about is like the happy-go-lucky, like kind of fun adventure, like spirit of Too Many Bones. And I was thinking about that in relation to coming out here and talking about like the dark, grisly
Yeah.
nature of Splice and Dice and some of these tyrants and stuff. And I was like, oh, I hope we didn't ruin that for him, but I don't know. Maybe he hasn't even played Splice and Dice at this point. I don't know.
It was still done. I think it was a nice. It was a nice. That was very unintentional. I just forgot he was gnawing on my finger. Thanks. I think it was a very careful process to go and thread the needle with regards to the dark feel of Nobulus in the lab and that whole aspect with the kind of happy-go-lucky nature of the Gearlocks. Like that was a tricky thing because I mean, they're literally cutting up and remorphing body parts together.
And we know our audience. We don't want, like, we have kids playing the game. We don't want to make it grotesque. Yeah.
Right. But yet, I don't feel like
maybe
anyone.
we do.
I don't know. I don't feel like anyone came off with that being like the overriding theme. It was the silliness of the interns and whatnot that came through. And so you had these really cool and very, an amalgam of creatures that are you're facing. But we kind of skipped all of the other darkness that is around it. So
my favorite tyrant from Splice and Dice in terms of the art is Ammonite, and I don't know if you remember Ammonite, but which is I don't remember where the name has something to do with like fungal growth. Ammonite before Christmas. Yeah, go check our Kickstarter updates for that back last year. But I'm curious because I think when I sent you the briefs for kind of to start getting the tyrants going, I think it was basically as simple as this guy is like a mold. Like that's the thesis statement behind this tyrant.
He's
like
used to that kind
giant
of direction from me though.
giant mold.
Yeah.
Like
What's
fungal,
really
whatever. So
interesting-
like where do you go? Where do you go
Where do
then
you
to
go
start
from there?
Yeah, like
Yeah.
Well, when I
check your fridge or
well, so mold in my mind is both the refrigerator mold, but it's also can be funguses and mushrooms and so I did a quick Google image search and found this bizarre looking mushrooms with like a
What
dot.
is
Yeah,
mold?
yeah, but it had dots on it, like and it was spooky looking.
Okay.
So then I
Were you
took
scared?
that, yeah, and I
Good.
kind of used that as a prototype and began to build off
Okay.
of that, and then I put some shelf mushrooms on it, and then just kind of started laying
Yeah.
in ideas, and that's where that one originated from.
Do you like operating under that, like more often than the other, like being told exactly what is needed, or like which is?
Well, obviously one gives me a lot more creativity.
Yeah. And sometimes that's a good thing.
Yeah, so I like that. However, when I go in that direction, then sometimes
Shut
it's
down.
not in the mind of the person.
Yeah.
So you don't know what you don't like until you see it, and so I like that because it gives me a greater sense of satisfaction when it is received, but it's also a greater sense of disappointment when it's like, no, we're going to go in a different direction because it's like, oh, I invested so much into that.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Um,
The other piece of tyrant art that I love is Oxide, and that like mechanical humanoid, and he's pretty gross too. Honestly, when you look at up close at him, or it, I guess I don't even know.
All of these like human teeth.
Yeah.
Like on Barnacle and on Oxide, it's
it just
just
does it.
creepy.
Yeah.
It's creepy.
Oxide is one of my favorites. I mean,
Yeah.
I
So
use,
where did you go for inspiration on Oxide?
the mirror, like
it was actually farm parts.
It all comes back to
Yeah,
farming.
it
for you,
does.
really.
I love
It does.
I love
It was parts of a tractor I had taken pictures of, and then just kind of put them together, and then began to kind of creep it out. If it doesn't have eyes, it's creepy, and if it has a mouth, it's even more creepier. So then you start playing that
Yeah.
realm.
That mouth reminds me a lot of like the alien, the
Yeah.
xenomorph in the
Yeah.
Alien series
Yeah.
a lot. So I was curious if maybe that had come into play at all either. So tell us maybe like the top 5 or 6 times you scared yourself in your studio with your own drawings. Just 5 or 6 of them.
5 or 6.
Yeah.
Just limited to that now.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
are you first of all, are you illustrating at night ever, or do you usually
Most of
cut
the
it
time,
off?
actually.
Yeah.
Most of the
Do
time.
you
Okay.
ever
Yeah.
get like, you're out in the country,
I am. Yeah, I'm out
like
in the middle of
way
nowhere.
out there?
Yeah. 40 acres and
Do you have bears roaming
15
around the
yeah,
house?
in my yard. Yeah.
And you,
Yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong, you slaughter your own animals?
Well, yes, I do. Yeah.
So
yes. This can get pretty graphic.
so that I'm just saying,
That's scary to some.
yeah.
But just to add to that, it does inform some gore.
Sure.
Right.
You
It
know,
does.
when you
It
are
does.
doing that process, you understand things at a level that other people don't know.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
I can imagine.
Harvest.
It's harvesting.
Yeah.
yeah.
Harvest.
Well, that's great. I love hearing about the inspiration for all of the art in Too Many Bones. All of those black and I think it comes across as that much more stark, too, when it's those black and white
Yeah.
illustrations.
Yeah.
And I'm not even sure. I don't know enough about art and art development to like understand why that is. But there's something almost like more sinister and scary about a lot of those things simply because they're black and
Very
white.
graphic.
Yeah.
I do like how that ended up coming out. Like originally, that was always the intention for the Baddies to stand out different than the Gearlocks and like have almost like a little bit of an unfinished feel to them, and it was a fun process because I initially a few people were asking like, is that just like low budget, illustration? Is like, hey, sorry Anthony, we only have money to pay you for black and white. But no, it was actually very intentional, and it does create that stark difference between them. So I think, I still like that choice to
Contrast
this day.
between the Baddies and the Gearlocks
Yes,
themselves.
yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Awesome. Well, hey, that's a little bit about the spookiest stuff or something
Yeah.
in the Too Many Bones. You can see we're all totally creeped out right now.
Yeah.
And so creeped out, I don't even know where to go next. So we're going to cut to the next segment, and I have no
To
idea
Stop really quick on that.
what
one.
it is.
Well, we were just laughing.
Speaking of laughing,
Oh man, yeah.
what's coming up next?
Yeah, man.
All right.
Announcing Frankenstanza.
Oh, perfect. Speaking of Halloween and spooky, we are ready to announce the next promo chip in our 2020 promo pack, and it happens to be another Halloween-themed Gearlock, which we've done before.
know?
We did slasher patches. We did the kind of Freddy Krueger homage with Pickett last year. So, Anthony, tell us, what have you cooked up for us for Halloween this year?
Frankenstanza.
Tell us a little bit about how you took Stanza as a character and kind of turned her into the Bride of Frankenstein.
Yeah, the Bride of Frankenstein is the key. So if you look at that character, that creature, she has a signature hairstyle. So to take Stanza's hair and the Bride of Frankenstein and blend them together was a challenge, but it was a fun challenge. And the question I kept asking myself, okay, so if it's Frankenstein, we're so familiar with Frankenstein himself being green, but the undead nature of them would not have any real color.
Yeah.
So I vacillated back and forth between doing, landed on green, but
Sure.
but
Yeah. Yeah.
Tried orange though.
Tried orange.
Didn't work.
but the zombie look,
Kinda,
yeah.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's
it.
awesome. So you'll be able to get Frankenstanza in the 2020 promo pack. We've talked about this, at a couple different junctures now, but on Black Friday, the promo pack will be available for purchase until the end of December, so until December 31st. And so now that we've announced the Cloudspire promo chip, we've announced the English version of the baddies from the Chinese edition of Bones, and now for Halloween, very scary, very spooky. We're all scared right now.
Yep.
We've got Frankenstanza, which will be available in that pack as well. We have one more chip that is going to be revealed around Christmas, so stay tuned for that, and then stay tuned for it also to be on sale on Black Friday this year.
I'm scared to find out what that one is.
You should be.
Yeah.
I'm so afraid. I'm so afraid. I'm also afraid I don't know what the segment after this is.
Yeah.
So take it away, you.
Hey, can you flip me the bird?
Hi everyone, welcome to Terrifying Trivia. I'm Shannon and I'm here with...
Hello, I'm Andrew, also known as Gasket.
So we are here delivering some trivia today. You should see on your screen the link to go to register. You can put in any nickname you want. You need to put in a correct email. You can't win the prizes if you don't put in a valid email, because that's how we contact our winners.
Correct. Yeah, so the other thing to remember as well, for those of you out there that have played this before, you cannot win 2 times in a row. So if you won one of the 3 prizes in last month's episode of the trivia, then please do join in. Try and get as many right as possible and lord it over all your friends and all the people in chat. But you will not be able to get one of the prizes this time around, and we'll make sure that fresh people get it and you can get them again next time. So what do we have for prizes this month?
So we have 3 prizes, all of which are signed by the designers, unless you don't want that. The first is Splice Dice. The second is the Dart expansion, and the third is the Lab Rats expansion.
It is. So all of the brand new spooky Splice and Dice and extra add-on characters for that one. So we're trying to keep in theme. And there was a request in chat for more spooky headdresses. So I think I'm not quite sure if we're spooky enough today, but maybe next time we can go completely ghosted up or something. But we'll see.
Trying. I'm not sure whether mine are completely visible, but I promise I'm wearing some awesome googly ears.
Are they ears? Are they really ears on top of a big antenna like that? But there we go. I don't actually know the answer to that.
They're eyes, actually, but...
We don't need eyes where we're going. Hang on. I don't know if this trivia is that spooky, but maybe it is. Maybe it is. Okay, so we have about 4 minutes before we get going here. Shannon, can we see how many people are entered so far? We have quite a lot of people watching already.
Yeah, we have 50 players registered right now, so that's pretty awesome.
50 players.
50. For anyone who hasn't participated before, I'll let you know kind of how that's going to go. On the video here, the questions are going to pop up with the answers. Those are also going to pop up on the device you're playing with. Because there's a little bit of a lag with live streaming, you're probably going to have it pop up on your device first. You can start playing that question as soon as it pops up. You get points for getting the right answer, and you get more points the faster that you answer it. So as soon as you think you know the right answer, click it, lock it in, and we're going to play through 20 questions, and the player with the most points at that point is going to win. Top 3.
Top 3, yeah. So again, number 1 gets the Splice and Dice game signed again by the authors, unless you really don't want that. I don't know why you wouldn't, but maybe you don't want people to know that they've touched it. And then Dart for second place, and the Lab Rats for third place. So good luck to everybody. Get those names in as well. We might call out a few of the better of the nicknames that people have put in, but try and keep it clean. This is
Yes,
midday
family-friendly.
kind of Central Time. Yeah, it is. It is. So.
In terms of what the questions are going to be on, it's going to have a spooky theme, of course, but we'll be testing all kinds of different knowledge from our games to even some pop culture. So you'll need to dig into a varied knowledge resource in order to do well here.
Right. Now, I know there's a couple of people out there that are absolutely zoned in on whether it be T&B questions or Cloudspire questions, and they get, in the 90th percentile every time for those. Well, I'm going to tell you now, there's a lot of pop culture in this one. So everybody else out there, there are a few rules questions in there, so we're not going to let you get away too easily. But lots of pop culture, lots of spooky references, and we'll see just how deep our designers go when they come up with some of these encounter ideas. So there's some good ones in here.
For sure. I'm excited. There's some great questions coming up.
Great questions coming up. And the question right now is, how long do we have left? We have about 80 or 90 seconds.
Yep, so if you're not registered for trivia, click on the link or go to the link. We also threw it in the Discord and in the YouTube chat. So get in there, get registered, even if you don't think you're good at trivia. There's 54 people registered, so you could just click enough right guesses to score high. So give it a try.
Why not, right? You've got a 25% chance of answering each one correctly, and what are the odds of that? At least you've got 75% of getting them all right. That's math. That's just pure math. Just the one though, not maths. Just one math. I think that's a problem, right? Okay, so we're coming up towards the 30-second mark. Again, just to reiterate what Shannon said, you will see the question in your window before we start reading them. So please don't wait for us. We're just going to read it out loud, give everybody a chance to think through what their answer is, but click your answer as soon as you know it. But a wrong answer is always worse, I think. So take the time if you don't know it straight away.
For sure. You get 0 points for answering incorrectly, even if you did it fast.
Yeah,
All
fast
right.
the wrong answer isn't better.
First question is dropping.
Here
So
we
if
go.
Stanza was trying to sell the most album copies of all time, which of these spooky sounding records would she have to beat for the top spot? Back in Black by AC/DC, Shark Sandwich by Spinal Tap, The Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd, or Thriller by Michael Jackson? It's a good question.
That is a very good question. I think one of my favourite songs of all time is on this list, and I wonder if people
I'm sure
out
a
there can
lot
guess
of
what it is.
people's favorite question of all times is on here. All right, so we're going to show the right answer, which is Thriller by Michael Jackson. 76% of you got that right.
76%. That's quite high. I think it's quite famous that Thriller selling 66 million copies. But obviously, the best song on that list, in my opinion, is "Dark Side of the Moon." Anything by Pink Floyd is pretty good.
All right, next question.
Fantastic stuff. Question number 2: which Gearlock was a tyrant before becoming a playable character? Is it A, Duster, B, Gasket, C, Dart, or D, Slank? So for those of you that have played through the base game, you probably know this one. If you haven't, then you might not. Again, the best character is on this list as well.
I don't know about that.
Hang on a minute.
Okay.
So the correct answer is, of course, A, Duster. And for those of you, the 6 of you, yes, that answered Gasket, well done. You don't get a prize. I am sorry. Okay,
all right.
on to...
In the Lost Woods encounter card, we indulged Joss Welgus's deep love of the Legend of Zelda franchise. Which one of these Zelda game titles did we make up? Zelda, The Wand of Gamelon, The Legend of Zelda Missing Link, The Legend of Zelda The Minish Cap, or The Legend of Zelda Triforce Heroes?
Okay,
we made
so
one of those up.
They all
one
sound
is
made
it?
up to me, if you ask me. Yeah. So
I
put it out there.
completely
Ghillie will hate me. I've never played a Zelda game. I'm sorry. You can fire me now, but I just haven't.
All right, the correct answer is Legend of Zelda Missing Link. And 31% of you got that correct.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah, that's pretty good. I think Ghillie was saying earlier there are some other Zelda references in some of the other encounters. All sorts of ones. I think he said there's all sorts of computer game references in them. The Spoony Bard and the encounter in Age of Tyranny. That's what he was saying. So, for those of you that want to find more of Ghillie's pop culture references deep in those encounters, please go looking for them and let us know what you find. Okay, question number 4. Which of these is not a baddie skill? Is it A, bribable, B, randomize, C, destroy, or D, in-depth analysis? That's quite a difficult one, actually, because I think, they all sound exactly like the skills that we have all over them. So, the question here is which one of those 4 is not a baddie skill?
and
What
the
do we
correct
think?
answer is destroy.
Destroy.
The
See, that's
20
just. Yeah, that sounds exactly like it should be a baddie skill, right?
Yeah, so 29% of you said in-depth analysis. That actually exists on the Drakenstrike Duo promo chip, which is in the 2018 promo pack, which will be available again on Black Friday.
Right.
Okay, next question. So far in the joining war, several Ankarian leaders have narrowly avoided a premature death. How many American presidents have died in office? Is it 10, 8, 6, or 4?
Well, as of filming today, this answer is correct. So.
Oh, let's not go there.
I think I just did. Sorry. So yeah, it's a good question actually. I'm not quite sure how linked to Halloween it is. So the correct answer is Shannon.
B8.
It is 8.
Yeah.
So the last one who died in office was in 1963, was JFK. Very famous one. I can't believe that. There were some attempts on presidents' lives in the 60 years since, but there we go. 8 so far.
All right.
Okay, so coming up to question number 6. Which agrees unit can eat other units? Is it A, Eckle, B, Dampskitter, C, Ekri, or D, Mugwump? I like saying Mugwump.
I love just the name Mugwump. It's just so charming. It itself is a bit of a charmer.
I think so. I think if we were ever going to make a plushie, it would be a Mugwump.
All right. Correct answer is?
The correct answer is C, Ekri, of course. Why would the Queen not want to just eat everything and get bigger and stronger?
All right. The majority of you actually thought it was the Mugwump. That's interesting. But no, it is Ekri. And actually, it's within our office, we disagree whether it's pronounced Ekri or Etri. So whichever way you pronounce it, we don't know either.
Right. So it feels like the Greeks have been around since, pre-Roman. So that's why I go with the hard C, go with Ekri. Latin, there is no soft C in that. So there we go. There's got to be a link there somewhere.
All right, question 7. We've had a couple of promo chips inspired by classic horror movies over the years. Which of these horror franchises has the most movies? Is it Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, Final Destination, or Hellraiser?
Good question. The scary movies, all of them.
I'm not much of a horror movie person, but there's some good ones out there.
Right. They do tend to go quite comedy though, and I think some of the plot lines, especially in films and movies like the Final Destination franchise, they have some laugh out loud deaths, which I'm not sure they should be funny, but maybe they should. But there we go. Okay, the correct answer is
Friday the 13th, which has 12 movies, which Ghillie notes that feels like a missed opportunity.
Well, they can't get to 13 without making 12, so the opportunity's still there, I guess.
Yeah, true.
Okay,
All
they can't just go
right,
from 11
take
to
it
13.
Take it away with
Sorry.
the next one.
Okay, question number 8. Which Undertow Tyrant has the highest day limit? So this is the number of days in which you can successfully get to him and fight him. Is it A, Colossum, B, Volkesh, C, the Goblin Queen, or D, Nobulus? They are all they're tricky, very tricky tyrants to face up against, depending on which character makeup and path you choose to do. But which one gives you the most amount of time to do it?
Well, we're about to find out.
We are.
Answer is Volkesh.
Okay, the correct 25% of you got that. 44% of the people out there said D, Nobulus. Okay, that's an interesting one.
That is. I mean, Nobulus is well known as sort of the last boss and maybe one of the hardest ones. But
Right.
one of the reasons he's hard is because we don't give you as many days to get to him.
There we go. Time pressure is a big thing in Bones. So there we go. Okay, over to question number 9.
All right. Costume time. Ghillie can communicate with his pet falcon, just like the Falconer from the recurring sketch series on Saturday Night Live. Who played the Falconer? Is it Will Arnett, Tracy Morgan, Will Ferrell, or Will Forte?
That's I love this question. It's such a tenuous link to Bones.
I mean, a lot of these are really, but I like the links that we're creating.
Yes. We like board games. We also like this thing not connected. But I love that.
Right. Correct answer is...
It is D, Will Forte. There we go. I did not know that. So SNL is big in the UK, but it isn't shown very often. You normally get it years, if not decades later than everybody else. So I missed out on a lot of this, and I'm catching up.
Well, if you got that wrong, don't feel bad, because only 16% of you got it right. So
wow. That is a very difficult question. Okay, let's see if
we'll
question
do
10
question
is
10,
any easier.
and then we'll look at the leaderboard. So go ahead.
Okay. Ghillie's keen eye is also capable of spotting an imposter. That's very true. Which of these 4 answers from the previous question was not actually an SNL cast member? Is it Tracy Morgan, Will Ferrell, Will Forte, or Will Arnett? So, for those of you that are just hitting buttons very quickly, they are not in the same order they were in the first question. So let's hope you spotted that. But also, which one is not a real SNL cast member? They're a real person. They're just not.
Answer is Will Arnett.
Will Arnett. There we go. Hey, there we go. A lot of people got that right. 55%. Well done.
Well done. I don't know if I would have gotten that right. All right, let's look at the leaderboard and see where we're at.
Ooh,
okay.
Number 1
60
with
people playing.
Yeah, that's a huge amount of people. Well done, everybody.
So we've got Ryan Picklesheimer at the top, and then number 2 is definitely not Macaroon. Of course it wouldn't be, because he won last time, so he couldn't win again this time.
Tommy
so
can't
it's
win.
Definitely not him.
Yeah. Third place right now is Clement with 280 points, hot on the heels. Bear in mind, one answer could get you above the others.
Absolutely. There's tons of you above 200, so.
Right. Number 4, all the beat 2. There's no hashtag in there, but I think it is a reference.
All right, we're going to go on with question 11. What is the name of the skeleton merc hero in the Cloudspire base game? Is it Laudnil, Lostomeyer, Londil, or Lawrence?
That's a great question.
I'll give you a hint. The correct answer starts with an L.
That's giving away too
Did
much. We
not
might as well just tell them the answer. Wow, outrageous. This is my favourite character in Cloudspire, though, I must admit.
Is it? That's interesting.
Yeah.
All right, the correct answer is Londil. And 35% of you, the majority, got that right.
Yeah, that's closer than I thought. They lost me areas. It's a good answer, but yeah, Londil it is. Okay, so moving on to question 12. One of the creepiest stories we've brought you over the years was the final chapter of Triplock. What is it called? Is it A, the station, B, the device, C, the factory, or D, the estate? So
we're looking for the last chapter of Triplock.
The last one, episode 4, chapter 4, number 4, encounter 4. It's the last one. So for those of you who haven't played it, Triplock comes with one full scenario in the box, and then it has 3 expansions. The third expansion is expansion number 4. Scenario
And the
number 4.
correct answer is...
It is D, the estates. Well done to those of you that got it right. In fact, that was a really even split, apart from the station. Maybe everybody has that one in the base game.
Yeah, I think that's... People know that the station's in the base game, but if they don't have
Right.
the other ones,
They've just
or if
guessed
they haven't played them, yeah.
Right. I like it. Well done, everybody.
All right, question 13. The only place you find more creepy monsters than in Daylor is in Monster Mash by Bobby Pickett. Which of these monsters was not a guest in the hit novelty song? Is it Wolfman, the Invisible Man, Dracula's son, or Dracula himself?
That's a great question. This is like a 1960s song, isn't it? So it's black and white and very spooky and very thematic. And
Do you
all
listen
of
to
those.
Monster Mash?
Of
Do you
course.
listen to Monster Mash in the UK?
Yeah, all the time. It's like we have it at birthdays, bar mitzvahs, weddings. Just seriously,
All of them.
Monster Mash all the time.
You listen to it more than us. All right, the correct answer is The Invisible Man. Congratulations to the 20 of you that got that correct.
Right.
And the Monster Mash was released in 1962.
I think it got to
Alright.
number 1 in the hit parade. I think that's what they called it in the 60s.
Oh,
Nice. There we go.
interesting.
So well
Alright.
done, Bobby Pickett. Okay, question 14 is also relating to Bobby Pickett. Which one of these songs is a real song written by Bobby Pickett as a sequel to the Monster Mash? Is it A, The Werewolf Bar Mitzvah, B, The Monster Rap, C, A Witch's Invitation, or D, Christmas with the Devil? That one sounds really evil when you say it like that. It's like, I'm not
It
sure
really
Bobby Pickett is
does.
that evil. Yeah, this is it's a great question and some of the great
I
answers.
wouldn't have
Thank you
known
again
the
to
answer
Ryan.
to this one. But the correct answer is Monster Rap.
Absolutely. Oh my god, it's
29% of you.
I'd be surprised if any one of those 29%, those 15 people, actually knew the answer. And if you did, we can talk about it in chat afterwards because you have far too much time on your hands. Yeah, that's an odd one.
Indeed. And that was released in 1995, so just a few years after the Monster
Wow.
Mash. Just a few.
Talk about dragging out the anyway, carry on.
All right. 15. The rebooted Hoplomachus is going to largely revolve around the eruption of which of these volcanoes? Is it St. Helens, Nova Rupta, Vesuvius, or Thera?
I like this question. As a
I do
European,
too.
we've got a head start on this one.
Can you recognize the volcano from the image?
So there we go. Just a couple
Okay.
of seconds left.
Correct answer is, of course, Vesuvius. 94% of you got that right, so maybe it was a bit of a gimme, but I'm glad that so many of you got it right.
Such an iconic piece of art. So again, well done to Anthony for doing that and using the Turner paintings as an inspiration. And for those of you that haven't been, please do go to Vesuvius. It's a beautiful place.
And if you can't go to chiptheorygames.com/Hoplomachus and you can see the art up close.
Nice segue.
All
We shall
right,
links.
go ahead.
Okay, question 16. Bellow Howl is a splice of which 2 tyrants? Is it A, Nom and Mulmesh, B, Goblin King and Nom, C, Mulmesh and the Goblin King, or D, Gendrix and Catherine Sunshine Jackson? See, I can't even say that out all in one go.
This is a good question. I mean, you kind of have to go to the art on it.
Right. It's a great piece of art, this one, when Anthony splicing all these ones together and coming up with characteristics from both that really give them a real new look. So here we go. Correct answer is A, Nom and Mulmesh. Well done to 46% of people. That's quite high, actually. Higher than I thought that was going to be.
Good job.
Good job.
All right, we are rounding into the end here. Just 4 questions left. So number 17. Nobulus's many schemes have largely been responsible for the near disappearance of Gearlocks from Daylor. What is the name of the English colony in what is now Virginia that mysteriously disappeared disappeared in the late 1500s? Is it Plymouth, Kingston, Williamsburg, or Roanoke?
Great history question, this one. Right down my alley.
Well, neither of us are Americans, so we don't learn this in school where I'm from.
That is true, but you know, that's what the internet's invented for, right? But
all right.
here we go. So yes, the answer is D, Roanoke. And again, if you haven't looked into the history of this one, it's fascinating. They still don't 100% know what happened to them. Did they starve and move away? Did they get some kind of disease and disappear? Were the natives not particularly friendly and drag them all away from their land that they were stealing at the time? We just don't know.
That's kind of spooky.
It is spooky. Scary.
All right.
Okay, question number 18. The Narora often appear quite spectral. Which of these Narora units can pass ghost-like through other units? Is it A, Burnout, B, Lightress, C, Drift, or D, Void? So which one of those is a spooky, spectral, ghost-like unit that moves through other units?
I feel like anyone familiar with Cloudspire, those really familiar with Cloudspire are going to get this pretty easy.
Yeah, they should. I use this unit a lot. Certainly early game, stealing source from your opponents and things like that is a really good use of this one.
All right, correct answer is the Drift, of course.
It is.
62% of you getting it right. Of course, if you got it wrong, you can be forgiven because there are so many Naroran units, it's easy to get them confused.
Correct. It looks like a lot of Cloudspire players out there, so yeah, well done to 2/3 of you, Nini. Good answer.
All right, we are at the second last question, number 19. Cloudspire hero Drang and her brother Sturm are inspired by the phrase Sturm und Drang, a German arts movement from the 1700s. What does Sturm and Drang translate to in English? Is it shoot and drop, storm and drive, storm and fury, or strike and destroy?
Great question. And in the notes for this one, I think it's worth pointing out that Ghillie said that it's Ryan flexing his muscles about his art knowledge and showing everybody how above us all he is with his terms and phrases and things like that. So yes, well done, Ryan.
Well, I wouldn't agree with that because Ryan is about the most humble person I've ever met.
That's true. That is super true. Super true.
All right, correct answer is actually Storm and Drive, and only 5 of you got that one correct. So clearly it was a tricky one.
It is, and it looks like, from what I can see here, 4 of those are our German customers. So well done to you. To the one person that wasn't German. No, I'm only joking. I can't tell.
All right, we're going to go on to the last question, and it is game related. So hopefully that'll be an easier one for you guys.
Okay, fingers on those buttons. Question 20. What is Nobulus's second tyrant encounter called? Not the first one, the second one. A, Breaking the Immortal. B, The Science of Immortality. C, Nobulogging. Or D, A Critical Decision. And this, in fact, is a critical decision. Will you go A, B, C, or D? Oh my word.
It's a tough call. I mean, they're all pretty plausible, knowing Nobulus as we do.
As we do, sadly.
As we do.
Yeah.
All right, correct answer is Nobulogging, and 21% of you got that one right.
Wow, there we go. 42% went for the Science of Immortality, so more than 2 times the number of right people went for that one. So that it was a good curveball question thrown in at the end. Well done, Ryan.
All right, let's take a look at our winners.
Here we go.
Number 1. Definitely not Macaroon. Pulls it out with 586 points.
Wow.
Although I have a feeling that Macaroon, or definitely not Macaroon, is going to be disqualified for having won before. So second place, Ash210Z. Third is Mark Buxton. And then, of course, if any of those 3 won in our last trivia, then we'll keep going down the list. So keep it. Dude Dundancy is on here at 7th place. I have
just about to spot it out. Yeah. So for those of you that don't know everybody's internet names and things like that, there are quite a few of you who beat one of the owners of Chip Theory Games in the quiz about Chip Theory Game stuff. So
you all should be proud. All right,
yes, you
well
should
then
look very
everyone
well.
will reach out to you by email if you're a winner, so keep an eye out for that. And thank you for participating.
Thank you all. We hope to see you again later on in this episode, where we're going to be talking about lots of Burncycle hotness. And somebody not a million miles away from here, called Gasket, is going to be painting some spooky versions of the Cloudspire minis. So stick around for that. We're going to be doing a giveaway towards the end of that as well.
All right, thanks for watching.
Hey everybody, it's
Hello,
me,
hello.
Josh Welgus, or Ghillie, as you probably know me a little bit better.
And Josh Carlson.
And we are here to give you some of the first gameplay details about Burncycle. So you'll remember from Gen Con, that we talked at a very, very high level about what the game is kind of all about.
Yep.
We talked a lot about the art and the theme and some of those types of things. As the game is shaping up, we are now starting to be able to talk a little bit more about how some of the actual gameplay mechanics work as we approach the November Kickstarter. So, as is the case with all of our games, there's a lot going on here. But we're going to talk about we're going to focus in on a few things specifically today. We're not going to give you like a full this is how the game plays.
Yep.
Part of that's because that would take a little bit. Part of that's because the game is evolving on a day-to-day basis, and part of that is just our own sort of arrogant attitude where we don't want to show you everything just yet.
It's true.
We like
It's true.
holding our cards close to the vest, as you know.
Yep.
And so there is a little bit of that kind of secret withholding. We want to keep your attention all the way up to the launch in November.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to start by asking you, Josh, how is the game shaping up? Let's talk about let's talk about it on a mechanical level first, and then let's talk about some of the components. Now, what you're seeing here on the table, we should mention, this is a prototype. This is and this.
What?
Yeah, I know. If you can believe it, the game is not going to come.
It's not
with
come on paper,
printed
taped
paper taped together. But also, this prototype is likely larger than what the final version is going to be. Here in the office, we have a lot of prototype chips, blank chips laying around, and so when we put together prototypes, we do it in such a way that we can use the myriad of blank chips we have on hand.
Yep.
So just know that this is not, and this map art is also very placeholder.
Yep.
This is not reflective of what the map in the game is truly going to look like from an art perspective. But
we made it bigger just for ease of use. Like, we wanted to look at everything from like when guards are moving down the hall, how much space is actually needed between whatever chip or whatever token we use as the guard, and the sides of the rooms that are making up the entire building. So like even just that little thing, once we have that locked in, we know like what that spacing needs to be. Then we can downsize everything if need be and use potentially smaller chips than poker chips, or we will keep it at poker chip size. We haven't made that determination quite yet, but yeah. So to talk a little bit about like what the game is and how things are shaping up right now, like it's finally entering kind of another really exciting point. There's always, I think I've spoken on this before, there's always like ebbs and flows with design, because you have this initial idea and it's often just a gush and it keeps coming, and you're throwing ideas up on a spreadsheet, and then like that comes to a stark stop at some point where you have to now start to like gel it all, and that can be a really frustrating point in the process where like a lot of individual mechanics are awesome, but nothing seems to like actually be going together, and that's sometimes where a project can sit for like a year or two, until you start to have more inspiration, or until like certain things reveal themselves, or until you brute force your way through it. Sometimes it takes all three. But now, like when we have this playable prototype that's starting to be playable and starting to like reveal certain things to people more than just myself, like being able to share and have discussions on a lot of different aspects, and then also like to see some of the art coming into it and like see that part of that. I don't know, like that definitely plays in for me. I'm such a visual person that like if I can't see and be convinced that this could be the game, it's very, very hard for me like to play with white paper with notes written all over it. And sometimes that happens, but like we still have some dice with words written on them. But yeah, I guess I would just say this is a really exciting time for me, is to get into it and now start to see visually the thing take shape and play out either as intended or not.
Right.
You know, and then tweak from there. So a lot is happening in these next like 2 months.
Right. Yeah.
Like,
Absolutely.
right up to the Kickstarter.
Yeah. Absolutely. So.
Yeah.
So if you missed our Gen Con explanation, so the basis of Burncycle is really you are robots. You are fighting back against evil corporations. That's the like 3-second version. Humans were wiped out. Robots brought them back to life. Humans promptly enslaved the robots again, like the jerks that they are.
Sure.
So you are sneaking into these big corporate headquarters and trying to steal back information, trying to break out of some of the restrictions that the humans have put on the robots and their race, as it were. So. I think as the game is shaping up, you know, we're taking a look at a lot of the things that people really, really loved about Too Many Bones. So it's a 1 to 4 player cooperative experience. So it can be played fully solo, you know, as you'd expect from our games. You are going to play as one of many different robots. I think I'll put this on the. Hopefully you can see that from the overhead camera. And this is a good opportunity for us to show like how some of the components are gonna shake out.
Like this is a really, really crude example of this, and I don't know what's going to be the best way to show it. But the idea is that there's a card, a robot card, and that's representing your robot. It's got a number of very unique aspects to it that will slip under a neoprene mat. That mat is kind of like your interface, and that's what you're going to be upgrading the robot with. So with a system of pegs, dice, all sorts of different things, from pegs, dice, and cards that kind of lock into this mat. And because it's on neoprene, the neoprene actually holds that card in place underneath, so you can slide your mat around and the card doesn't like leave the position that it's supposed to be in. These are going to be oversized cards that have a lot of border that is going to be touching the neoprene. So that's the robots, but it allows us to switch out the robots and only have 4 pieces of neoprene that are your kind of like your control interfaces for the bots.
Yeah. So you can see, you know, the size of this mat, you know, with the card inset here in an actual neoprene mat. You can see it's smaller than a Gearlock mat.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we're looking at with Burncycle is, again, taking a lot of the aspects we loved about Bones and trying to maybe curtail some of the things that are often barriers to getting Bones to the table. So you can see there's not nearly as many dice going on with this, or custom dice going on with this specific robot. There are abilities that they can unlock, their first, second, third primary skill, that kind of thing. They can unlock mods to make them more powerful, and then they do have some unique keywords on there, but it's not anywhere near, you know, like sending your buddy Nuggets reference sheet 2 nights before game night and saying, hey, study up and watch 3 videos so that you come to game night ready to play Nugget. We really tried to, or we're trying to make this a more approachable on a first time sitting down cooperative game, and that goes from the kind of the streamlined mechanics of the game itself down to your characters as well. So
one thing I'd add to that is that what we're focusing on with the bots, there's a lot of uniquenesses, but the uniquenesses actually come out in how you play and use them on the board. So unlike Bones, where it's a really confined map, and therefore all of the intricacies of the Gearlock happen on your Gearlock mat when you're deciding which skills to play and all of that. In this game, it's happening out there, and so there's still a lot of agency, a lot of choices to make. But it's how you use some of the precious things you have, and how you've upgraded them, and how you maximize those choices on the board. And I don't know if you mentioned this, but you're climbing 3 different levels. So what we've done with the board is it's a building.
It's one floor. It's representing one floor. But all of these mats, they're neoprene. Of course, we have to do neoprene. No, the whole point of neoprene on this is, one, like you can see that if I'm moving something around and this was paper or if it was cardboard on cardboard, like these rooms are constantly going to get bumped and shifted and moved. But the minute you take a neoprene piece and then a thinner piece, this is going to serve as the room. We're still testing 2mm and 1mm. 1mm will work even better, but we want to make sure it holds up. Like just with a lot of play and with use, we want to make sure that the graphics stay vibrant and all that. But 2mm lays down and it doesn't go anywhere. So like that kind of a room layout where we can take the same basic floor, and if I pull these away, you can see that the entire map is just basically hallway, or that's what it serves or turns into when you start laying down the rooms. So every room to every corporation is going to have a different layout, and the rooms are going to create that layout. So yeah, like the rooms, not all of the rooms are going to be used on every floor. Not all the rooms are going to be used in every corporation that's represented. So there will definitely be a feel. And I could think we can speak to that with Need Chain. Need Chain is one of the corporations that you're going into, and it's kind of a hodgepodge of like it's a fulfillment type corporation, and therefore there's warehouse.
Like imagine if you
office.
can imagine like this big corporation that kind of like you could buy anything from
Right.
them. Like
Yeah.
it's hard to think of anything that resembles that, but like
Right.
you could go on the internet to like a website and you could order almost anything in the
Yeah,
world.
it's hard to come up with a prime example, but
Yeah, that's a really 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 good point.
anyways,
yeah.
so you've got Need Chain, and like what we want to do is we want to have the hallways for the floors, like we're going to put the rooms a lot closer together. There's not a lot of room to get through, whereas potentially some of the tech companies, you'll have like double wide hallways. You can much more easily skirt guards, or use the width and the openness to your advantage. Whereas this one, it's like if a guard's standing in your way, you either have to go a different way or deal with it. Mm-hmm. So like very different field, very different approaches, potentially different ways of building your bot just based on the floor layout. Mm-hmm. Then on top of that, you've got terminals. Those are the chips that you're seeing out here. Those are your main sources of XP when you're and ways of advancing your bot. It's also the ways you're going to unlock doors, you're going to scout and like surveil other rooms to see what's in them before barging in. So much about this.
Yeah. So there's a much bigger I would say exploration element in Burncycle than there has been in any of our previous games. You know, in Bones, you're drawing an encounter, and whatever's on that encounter, you deal with it right then and there. Mm-hmm. In Burncycle, when you first enter a floor, you have all these rooms, and you might know kind of what's possibly in all of these rooms, but you don't know exactly what's in those rooms until you either explore it yourself by walking right in the door, and who knows what you're walking into, or unless you surveil a room by accessing either the Wi-Fi network or a terminal, and we just talked about terminals a little bit, to surveil a room. And what that looks like is, you're going to see dice, and we may do some cards and some other things with each type of room. But you see these dice, and when you enter a room or surveil a room, you're going to be rolling this die and seeing what is actually in this room. That will reveal if there is indeed a terminal in there. That will reveal that there's a guard sitting at his desk, or that will reveal that there might be just any kind of kind of some of the clever twists we put on things in Cloudspire and Too Many Bones, little rules, exceptions, things along those lines. So
and that will basically inform whether you're going to like plan that room into completing your objectives. So you have one or two objectives currently on every floor, and that's a little bit of a greed thing. Like you can decide as a team if you want to go for both objectives. That's going to give your team more XP to work with if you complete them both. But now all of a sudden you have to complete them. So the minute you accept two, now you're bound to two. If you want to go easy with one, that's going to be much less risky, but also the payoff isn't quite as good. But like if you roll and see that there's a special terminal, like a red terminal in there, you might go out of your way to get to that room, even though it doesn't line up with the objectives that you've drawn. just because that's a really special access terminal that's going to give you potentially access to more XP or a way to reduce threat, all sorts of different things. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you access a terminal in a room, you're going to be drawing from this terminal deck that hopefully you can see on the overhead camera here. And the terminal deck, when you draw it, is going to typically have three choices on it that relate to the building in some way, relate to experience points in some way, actions, that kind of thing. And they can kind of serve as almost as a combination of loot cards, because typically accessing a terminal is going to be a good thing and is going to give you some kind of reward for it, and as well as sort of a mini encounter, because you're going to have three choices on there. Some of them will require a security check that where you need to pass some kind of test, or there's a penalty in order to accept the reward, that kind of thing. But this is where again, that exploration element, you never know what you're coming into when you open up that terminal. And so your build for a scenario for that floor, your build for the rest of your team is all going to be adapting on the fly based on what you're seeing and drawing from this terminal deck. So that's a really basic there's a lot more to it than that, but that's a basic idea of kind of what is the point of going in all these rooms beyond just whatever your objective is. Accessing terminals is going to be a big part of the game, and a big part of how the dynamic of each floor works.
And what you talk when you talk about doing a security check, one thing I just want to clarify is, because there's a lot of games that will do like a dexterity check or something like that, where it's strictly just rolling dice. It's a roll and see, and what did the result, did I pass or not? There's we want to up the ante on that. We want it to be much more within your control, but also like risky within your control, if I can say that. So like the dice as a resource is kind of a good way to talk about it. Your dice that are going to allow you to do things in the game are one of two different types. But then you also have a burn cycle that you're manipulating, and that has a certain amount of actions, different action types. Depending on where you're at in the burn cycle, you're going to get a bonus. It's a guaranteed amount of action points just for lining up an action that you want to do with the correct symbol. So even if you're not at a place where you really want to move or engage with something, you might go ahead and skip down to that one so that you can get that guaranteed +2 AP to get around a corner and get out of guard's vision, and then try to finish up what you wanted to do, whether it was access Wi-Fi or whatnot. So, but you're rolling these dice, and you have a lot of control over if you want the chance at rolling misses or not. So the first level, the base level dice have 2 blank sides on them. Those could be cashed in for an actual AP point if you rolled 2 of them, or you let them go and they go back to your pool and could contribute a full 2 points each if you end up rolling a 2 on them. So, like, again, how you manipulate that dice resource is much more important than whether you roll exactly the numbers that you wanted. Because if you're going to be coming up on a turn on second floor where you're going to have potentially 10, 12 dice available to you. Well, which ones are you going to do to get around that corner? Are you going to chance that you're going to roll a couple misses and maybe come up short? Or are you going to guarantee it with picking some of these dice that you've upgraded that have no misses on them? But those are valuable for other things. So yeah, there's just, we're just scratching the surface of that, because every action handles these differently or relates to these action dice differently.
Yeah, so rolling,
lots to unpack.
Yeah, rolling these action dice are what give you your basic actions in the game, whether it's movement, whether it's accessing a terminal, whether it's interacting with guards and doors and that kind of thing.
Chests.
And you start off with like not very great odds because you start off with just your weak dice, but when you get experience points, you can either unlock more of those basic dice that don't have great odds on them, but you have more to work with, or you can upgrade dice to your guaranteed success roll kind of dice, or you can use that XP to unlock mod slots and make yourself more durable and give yourself another skill, etc., etc., etc. So that's how I would say in this game, whereas in Bones it's all about building your gear lock, This game, it's a lot more about building your team and making sure that you have a good team build going on. There's a captain bot that none of you are directly controlling at the beginning of the game, but you can contribute points to your captain to make them more powerful, and if you end up incapacitated, then one of your team can take on the role of the captain. If the captain's eliminated, you lose the game automatically. So there's a whole bunch of other things going on. We haven't touched the network over here either, but that's some of how Burncycle starts to work. We talked about the Burncycle over here. This is a randomly drawn sequence that happens, and this represents the limits that the humans have put on you. It's called the Burncycle.
Yeah, basically the humans have kind of limited all of your actions as a bot, and the bots have come up with what we're calling a Burncycle to manipulate those actions in a certain way to allow them to kind of circumvent those limitations, but they're still using the actions that they were locked into.
Right.
So it's changing every round, therefore it's not really... It's more of a sequencing puzzle in that regard, and you can always do any basic action on any one of these tokens, but you're missing out on the benefits potentially if you don't align them, and that's kind of a big deal. So
there's right now there's 5 slots in the Burncycle that may go down to 4. But again, at the beginning of the round, you're going to draw randomly from a bag between physical actions, utility actions, and tech actions. And place those out on the Burncycle, and then you follow those in sequence. So when we originally talked about this game at Gen Con, this sequencing aspect was controlled by the player, and it was taking on a little bit more of like a programming aspect. That we have found in playtesting just creates a little bit too much analysis paralysis, and and also a little bit more control than we wanted over this kind of thing. It wasn't serving its function as like the humans controlling the robots. So
we wanted the strategy to come into it when you're using the Burncycle, not necessarily what you're selecting to put in it. So the selection that gets into that Burncycle is still determined by the bots you're bringing to the table. So they all have a contributing amount of different types of tokens or action types, and those get mixed into a pool and drawn, and the Burncycle is built. So there are ways of manipulating that or adding to it. If you want more physical actions available to you, you might choose to unlock certain slots that give you, a higher chance of drawing that to go into your Burncycle.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of a bag builder element to it.
A little bit.
Like we said, there's a lot going on. So we'll be talking about all of these things in more depth and in more detail as more and more of the rules get like really, really locked down. Again, everything, the way that we develop, things are in flux for a long time. So if we're vague about anything or talking about it at a high level, the reason for that is simply that we're still playing with some different elements. But let's talk about one other really big piece of the game, and that is the threat meter. And kind of the way that, let's talk about the way that the humans, as we're all exploring this building, doing our thing, what is it that raises the tension and makes makes it harder for us to win this game?
Well, it's so cool because that was something that I wanted to introduce a little bit slower. So you get out into the level and you're in the first floor, and in playtesting already, I purposefully we didn't have the threat kick in so quickly, and everyone found that the minute it kicked in was when the game got really intense, but in a good way. And so we're already looking at shifting and introducing threat a little bit faster. But basically there's a lot of different ways threat can happen. It can be from being spotted by a guard, it can be from tripping an alarm, it can be from at the end of every round your threat is just going up. Your threat is serving as kind of your time or your clock or countdown for you to get through all 3 floors. So you're trying to access the CEO's chamber on the top floor before your threat reaches 26. If it reaches 26, it's a mission fail. That's the other way you can lose. If you lose your captain, you're gone. But also, and probably more prevalent, is the mission fail at 26. So you're always trying to reduce your threat by either, hacking a terminal and saying, hey, hacking the comm system and saying there's no issue here, or reducing threat that way. Hiding, staying out of sight. There's ways of reducing threat. There's ways of reducing threat from your network. But the threat, and I think this is the key aspect to the threat is it takes on, like Grimace is the CEO of Need Chain currently, but he doesn't have stats himself. His security detail does, and his security detail is drawn, and the captain of the security detail takes on a unique aspect that will be different every game, and he brings guards. But Grimace himself, his stats are actually this threat meter. So how Grimace plays out, or how Need Chain plays out as a corporation, will be seen on this. So this is a die cut hole in this big neoprene thing, as are these
In the
circles
same way
here.
that you saw the bot earlier.
Yep. And so another PVC card is slipped underneath there, and that lines up with your threat meter here. And anytime you hit something that corresponds with the number on the card, bad things happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
exactly.
and there's certain different things, like there's things that happen once. So when you trigger an IP scan, the CEO starts pinging the network. So he starts to send pings out on this virtual network. We'll talk about that later. That never happens again. Even if you go below 4 and come back to 4, it's not going to trigger again. However, escalation levels, those do happen and like get turned on and off. So if you can get your escalation or your threat down to 7 again, now all of these things turn off. The level 1 doors are now level 2. Those go back to 1 again. So it matters, like your timing and when you reduce threat and when you allow it to increase. It all matters.
Yeah, yeah. So some of the things that are going to happen, again, Josh mentioned, there is door unlocking that happens in the game. So a lot of these red dots you see here represent, those will represent pegs that indicate whether a door is open or locked. And so you hit a certain escalation level, suddenly doors all become more difficult to unlock, and we already have seen that come into play in play testing several times. We're like, ooh, I'm going to get over around the corner, I'm going to unlock that door and get in that room and get the terminal and get the final objective we need. And as I'm rounding the corner, a guard sees me, and suddenly the doors all become harder to unlock, and suddenly I don't have enough AP dice to roll to unlock that door. That's a really basic example, but there's other things that we talked about. These Burncycle slots, they can become frozen. So, so they'll start to lock down even the Burncycle and make your ability to take actions even more restrictive. But I think the best way to think about it, really, is to think about it like a tyrant in Too Many Bones.
Sure.
The tyrant that you're fighting, and I think we got better and better at this as more and more Bones development happened, but the tyrant that you're fighting, at the end of the day, flavors your adventure in a bunch of significant ways.
Yep.
With Burncycle, that's exactly what's going to happen. Every corporation that you're going up against, that threat meter is going to kind of have a theme. Some of them might be really about restricting your movement on the network. Some of it might be about locking down doors and that kind of thing. Some of it might be about locking down your actions. But it's going to dramatically affect the way that your game feels based on the corporation that you are trying to infiltrate. So I think that's a really, really cool aspect of this game, and I think the fact that it's all done on a single card here, die cut, means that this game is ripe for expandability and new corporations and new flavor and that kind of thing. And I think it does a better job, even at a glance, of showing exactly what every corporation is about. Whereas with Bones, if you happen to not draw a tyrant encounter because it got shuffled goofy into your deck, sometimes you could go through a whole adventure and not really feel that flavor quite as much. It doesn't come through.
This you're definitely feeling the corporation that you're in, from the threat and also the makeup of the offices, and then just the relationship between that threat and the security detail that you draw. Sometimes those combinations can be vicious, and so you have to kind of restructure and plan ahead based on that combination.
Yeah. So I know, short of sitting down and doing a tutorial about how does this game work, how does it play, we hope some of this stuff has been really illuminating in terms of how this game is coming together. I think, as I look at it again, I think it takes a lot of the things that people love about Bones. It is very much, we're known for kind of our squad tactics games. Even Cloudspire and Bones, they take on a squad tactics feel. This is very much still a squad tactics game, but we've removed a lot of the just back and forth combat in the game and made it much more about sneaking around, exploring, making clever use of the skills that you have available to you.
Yep.
There's a lot of risk reward going on with the way that you use your dice. Your dice are really a resource in this game, as much as they are about just like resolving roles.
I would say, and also just the bots, the way you build them is going to be critically important. Like there's certain bots that specialize in smashing through doors and walls, but you have a limited amount of opportunities to do that. So you're spending those at like key moments, and you're always asking that question of, all right, we're on level 1, but this is like a perfect time for us to get access to 2 special terminals. Like, should we just do the breach now? And just forgo, that chance that we might need it on level 2. Like those types of things are really, critical decisions that ultimately maybe, if you pass it by, it's the perfect, that opportunity comes up later and it's perfect for you. There's equipment in the game, we haven't talked about that, and then the guard routes are also really fascinating, where the conflict is with the guards, but it's not combat per se. Like there are ways of taking out a guard, and that is like the best outcome. But to be able to pull that off on level 1 is nearly impossible. Mm-hmm. And so when you manage it, it's a great feeling.
Yeah.
So
yeah. This game has a quicker pace than Too Many Bones tends to have. I'll say that right out of the gate, and that's intentional. Again, these bots, we're planning on having about 8 bots in the box. At the launch of the Kickstarter, there are stretch goals, but eight bots in the box with the Kickstarter. And depending on where we go with price for the game, we're looking at 3 to 4 corporations in the box and that kind of thing. But I don't know. It's a really, really different experience from the rest of the stuff in our catalog. I think. But you're gonna see that CTG flavor and a lot of aspects of a chip theory game throughout it that you're gonna recognize and that are gonna feel very familiar as well.
Yep.
As JC mentioned, haven't touched on the network, haven't touched on guards and guard routes and guard skills and all of that kind of stuff. So there's still much, much, much more to show you.
Yeah.
But I think for now, we're going to leave this as it is. We hope that this has gotten you excited about Burncycle. We have so much more to show you in the coming weeks, and we cannot wait for the Kickstarter. I don't know. Anything else?
No, that's it. Thanks for joining us for this.
All right. I forget what's coming up next. I think it's Andrew Chesney doing some painting.
Yeah.
And he's got some horror-themed Cloudspire minis that he wants to show off.
They are looking so cool.
Yeah, they're super cool. So stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching. See you soon.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Miniature Painting. Here we are again. No matter how much distracting of Ghillie and Josh that I could do, forced them to finish earlier, so I had to wait my turn. So here we are, ready to go. They're going to be packing up in the background. So whilst we get started, I'm going to show you the 3 miniatures we're going to be working on today. And these are like a completely different Halloween twist on the normal models that you've been using in your Cloudspire games, hopefully. So we have, first up, is the Zombie Grove Tender. Now this one has been just like made to look all rotten. We haven't changed his appearance too much in terms of any sculpting on top of him, but we have given it a real spooky undead colour and feel. We have the Heirs Spire, which is completely and utterly black and like dark apart from the light source that's coming out of the doorways. But also we have the Neuroran Cauldron, which is obviously this one has changed enough that the Spire token won't go on top, but that shouldn't matter. Okay, I've got a stack of chips here to show you that actually can still be functional in the game, but this one has been turned into a witch's cauldron of wonderful gooey Disney-esque ooze coming out of the top. So we're going to go through some of the stages pretty rapidly because again these are bigger figures that we want to use during our gaming sessions. They're not there for prize winning painting or anything like that. So some of the stages you'll probably see quite quick. Yeah, here we go. What we'll do is we will actually start with some of the sculpting. So on top of the Nauroran cauldron, the Nauroran spire, we're going to sculpt in this ooze effect using a 2-part epoxy putty. Here we go. We have what is called green stuff on many circles, but it comes as yellow and blue. So I'm just going to take an original spire and cut up and do some stuff. So for any of you, again, we discussed in the last episode about the skills you need as a board gamer to engage with some of the minis you get in your things like that. And you don't have to have these superb award-winning things, and that goes for like sculpting and modifying them as well. So I am not and will never be a sculptor. It is not my skill set, put it mildly, but it doesn't mean to say you can't play around and do some fun stuff with what it is you're doing, and make your table a bit more interesting and a bit more unique. I think if everybody does it for themselves, as you can probably see in the background, I'm getting lighter and lighter. There are more lights being set. Hey guys, for those of you out there in YouTube land, I am not in the warehouse today. This is absolutely great. They're not giggling in the background. This is fine. It's all being done on the fly. Okay, so here we are. I'm mixing up my 2-part putty. And you can see the bright yellow and the bright blue is now going greener and greener and greener. What you're looking for, and I've got to be very careful. So in this one I have clean water for paintbrushes. I have water to be able to wash out the actual paint, and I have my drinking water. I do not want to get these things mixed up. Otherwise, I will have some very strange tasting drinking water. Okay, but what I want to do is I actually want to get some water on my fingers and keep this moving. It does dry out. It's quite a plastic texture to it, so it doesn't feel like clay at all. It feels like a lot more of a stronger. Funny story, I actually did this, I've done it on a couple of the minis for the testing. I did it with air clay to begin with, and I thought it looked great, and I did it and sculpted it and spent some time coming up with the bubbles and the idea, and then let it dry for an hour or two, and then sprayed undercoated it, and then came back to it the next morning, and the air dry clay had shrunk enough that it had all come away from the inside of the rim, and one of the used droplets had fallen off. So air dry clay, not the best to work with plastic minis. So here we go. Right, we now have a really nice smooth green consistency on the putty. You can see there that's now completely and utterly mixed in. There's nothing, there's no blue or yellow left showing through in streaks, and now we can just work with that and really be quite kind of robust with it and do it. What we're going to do is try and get some nice round edges and get it fairly flat, and then just dump it in and start pushing it down around. So with this one, I've got a couple of, they're actually dentistry tools that I use for, again, I am not a full sculptor, but I know that a lot of the sculptors that I've seen at Games Workshop and a lot of the other minis companies, they do 3D now for one, but that's not what we're doing here. But they use dentistry tools because they give a nice sharp edge if they're cutting, or if they want to sculpt and move, they've got nice different curved edges to them. So you can manipulate the putty any which way and direction you want. Okay, so we've pushed this down in, and the leftover flaps, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to push them down, and that is going to be our hanging ooze hanging over the edge. You can just see how easy this is. This isn't like any extra effort to come up with some kind of amazing technique to do the cauldron on top. There we go. So we're going to do that, and again you'll see there's a lot of fingerprints on this. So what I do is I get finger in the water, and I just like rub away all the fingerprints, and then when you come to paint it, you'll have a nice smooth finish. And then I'll come down, including the drips on the side. You can push those down, and you can automatically see that that's now just like, looks like it's hanging over the edge like that, and all the way around and onto the side like that. Okay, so the biggest difference between this, which is some liquid coming out of a cauldron, and this are the bubbles. So the way I do the bubbles is quite easy. I'll do one of them and then we can move on. You get a little bit of the green stuff. Again, damp fingers to make sure that you're not drying it out straight away. Roll it around into a ball, and then just pick a spot and push down the thing. You don't have to be too direct to this point. It doesn't stay like that, by the way. So what you want to do now is kind of like push it down and use your fingers to pinch it into place. dot it down as a thing, and now you've got the thing. What you've got a bubble shape. Now what you don't want is this seam. Obviously there isn't a seam between a bubble and the liquid itself. So what we're going to do is use one of the tools. Again, if you see me putting things into my mouth to get water, that's fine. None of this is toxic. But what we're going to do is we're just going to scrape down the edge of this. Here we go, all the way around the bubble. Just push it into the putty and it'll kind of merge with what is there on the base layer of the green stuff. We go all the way around. It'll look an odd shape to begin with, but it's really important that you get rid of the seam. So way more important than the shape of the bubble at this point is the actual smoothness of the connection. Okay, so we've got that, and again you've got this weird jaggedy edge to it, so there's a couple of ways of doing it. One is just use your fingers and again pinch it round and make that round shape again, and automatically you can see that's gone in. And then just go back in and just smooth away any other seams and you'll get this nice little thing. So what I actually found after doing this a couple of times with the air clay and the green stuff is I liked a little bit of an indent being left around as I was using this tool. It was completely by accident. It wasn't planned in any way, shape or form, but I've got a bit of an indent around the bubble. And then when I came to the finished one with the ink, it actually allowed me to give that impression that the bubble was rising up and popping up out of it. So there was a bit of a shadow, which on a very flat liquid platform of when you're painting, it's very hard to actually give the impression that there's a shadow there when there isn't any texture whatsoever to deal with. So actually having a slight indent meant it was a lot easier for me to know where it was that I should put the shadow and put the bump and the highlight. Okay, so a couple more little bubbles will allow us to do that. That I would probably give it 12 hours to cure overnight. There we go. So I've got some questions coming through. Actually, this is a really good point to put out there. If you want to ask me questions or ask me anything about painting or anything else, then please do. The team behind the scenes are going to throw them up on a board for me to see. Rob's Gaming Table has said, I assume this is what Andrew usually does on his lunch break. When I remember to take a lunch break, I'm usually scrabbling around for some food. Not sculpting, but hey, maybe I'll do some sculpting classes in the thing. So there we go. Anyway, we're going to move on from this stage to the next stage of this. You don't need to see me that. So like I say, leave it dry overnight and then undercoat it. This one has been undercoated in black because again, really spooky colours. We want to go for a dark finish. So I tend to use whatever colour spray, undercoat spray is I want showing through the most. So I use like a light leather brown if it's on a kind of a cloth figure or a building that needs to be majority brown. But with this one, we're going to do that. So you can see the top has been sculpted in the same way as the other one. The bubbles are on there. This is all now looking like a miniature to be able to start painting. So we'll move the sculpting tools and we'll go on to some of the brushes. My collection of brushes is ridiculous. I've got too many. I don't often use the super tiny detail brushes, but I do often use like a number 1 or a number 2, which are, they can hold a substantial amount of paint. And in this case, again, we're working with some of the larger miniatures. These aren't tiny 28mm figures. Yes, I do put everything in my mouth. I get a point on the thing with my mouth. I'm sorry, there in chat. Yeah, you are right. It's a bad habit, but it's the way I grew up doing it. Again, none of this is toxic. Don't stress. Please check your paints if you do it. So the way I like to start painting is I play around with colours and shades and techniques until I get the actual finish that I want. And then, because I'm very much a paint by numbers person, especially if it's something that I want to get to the gaming table, pretty rapidly, I'll line up the paints in the order I want to use them, because it takes away all that decision making and the amount of time it takes to move from one technique to the next. So in front of me I have a whole bunch of paints that are for all the miniatures I'm looking at today. So we're going to start with this one, which is it's called a Mechanicus Standard Grey. I don't know what's standard about it, but there we go. It's just grey. I've got my little pot. So I do have a wet palette, but because I'm using a really large amount of paint and we're going to really get into dry brushing and doing all sorts, I'm actually going to take that and put it into a plastic palette. Again, if you didn't see it the first time around, these are I think $3 for $1 at the Dollar Tree. And we're going to start with a dry brushing technique. So I don't want this stone in the final version to be completely flat grey. I want it to have some texture. So I need some of the darkness showing up through the cracks, and then the highlights will show what kind of stone it is on top. So we're going to start with this flat grey dry brush, which is getting rid of pretty much 90% of the paint onto a piece of kitchen roll. And then I'll take the largest, stiffest brush I can find, and honestly you could use larger than this as well. And then we're just going to build up in layers all over the miniature itself. We're going to push it in underneath because there's stone under the cauldron. And we're going to go all the way around. For those of you that saw the first one, I actually did this as a blue stone, bright blue, with different inks and layers of Neuroran-esque sauce flowing through it. This is less of a Neuroran spire and more of a Halloween cauldron of bubbling ooze, almost like the Neuroran have moved on from this aisle and somebody else has come along and filled it up with badness. Okay, so a bit more on there. Again, in this super bright light, it's hard to see every single stroke, but I believe that is pretty much grey all over. Again, I don't want to go too strong on it because we want a lot of the black to show through. So there we go. So it doesn't look like the finished article yet because we have a couple of tiny little extra layers to go through. So I'm going to push that to one side, and then the next paint that I've got lined up is the white. We'll give this a shake. I get through so much white, it's crazy. And we're going to put a tiny blob separate from the grey that I've been using, because I don't know exactly how much I want to add at this point, and I want to add it a bit at a time. So I'll take some of the white, put it on the end of the bristles of the brush, push it down into the grey, and it will come very quickly come through as to this super light grey. And there's a lot of paint on that brush now, so I'm going to again get rid of most of it. It looks like I'm painting more of the kitchen roll than the other one. And now we're on to a super light colour for the highlight. And again, this is really gentle. I'm just dragging down over, and I'm using the contours of the miniature. So one of the things that was great about these miniatures is when they sculpted them is they designed it with a lot of contours and a lot of texture to the surface. So I'm just dragging it across really gently. And again, with dry brushing, it's always better to do 2 or 3 passes to build up the layers than it is to do one sharp pass of like a highlight colour. So there we go. You can see how quickly that's come under. You can turn the miniature up this way and come down. You want to catch every aspect of the texture on it. And then we'll look at it from this angle and just make sure it's done all the way around. Okay, fantastic. I'm happy with that. And then what I'll do is I'll probably take a little bit more of the direct white on there, tiny bit on the edge, and I won't even mix it with the grey this time. I just want to kind of like get rid of most of it. There's enough paint in the bristles, even with rubbing most of it off, to have a lighter colour in there. And again, you can see straight away really gentle kind of dry brushing with the white as the final highlight on the edges. It only catches the most raised parts of the miniature and the texture of the stone. Okay, tell me out there in wonderful YouTube land if I'm doing this too slowly. We can move on. Okay, so normally at this point I would wash this out very, very well. We don't have time. We're going to move on. Wash it out later. I've got more brushes. It's fine. So the next stage of this one is going to be the bronze cauldron. So again, looking at the final one, we've actually got this copper rust effect. That's kind of like an aged one. That is way more simple than even I could imagine. There's a company called Games Workshop that have done a paint called Nilac Oxide, which is honestly one of the greatest inventions for adding this kind of texture. So we are going to get the bronze, super dark bronze undercolor. Now again, this is going on top of a black undercoat, so it will automatically look really dark. So we're going to get, this time I've got a kind of large flat brush. This is good for dry brushing as well, but in my case I'm actually doing quite a large area of paint, so I want to use quite a large brush so I don't have to keep going back. And again, we're not doing super detailed work, so here we go. We're going to go all over. I'm not going to stress about hitting the ooze on top, because that's actually going to be painted over, so I don't have to worry about that. All I'm going to do is make sure I don't go down onto the stonework, because that has been done. So I'm going to start at the stone and work my way up and dry brush up. If there's any kind of areas that have been left black underneath, that's fine, because that's like the burnishing on the different textures of the beaten metal. But we're going to make sure we go through all of these different areas from all the way around, and it's as simple as that. So this is kind of like the fun part where you start to see fewer black areas, and now it's coming together already in terms of the largest spaces. I always kind of like working with the big areas first and then move to the details afterwards. For a start, the details are usually on top of the bigger areas, so you always want to do the furthest inside the model first and then work out, so you can paint anything that's like layered on top of it over the top, and you're not having to cut back inside in terms of painting. But with the larger areas, it gives you that sense of accomplishment. Okay, and across the top we've got the brim of the cauldron, which we'll just do there. And then all the way around on this side. Again, I can be not sloppy. I don't want to be like messy for the sake of it, but I can certainly don't have to be too careful that I've caught all of the bits. And I'm just going to check under there. Now that I've got these giant lamps next to me, I can check all the colouring. Okay, so we've got that one on there. Now the band around the middle is also going to be this coppered tarnished metal colour. Some people like to paint just the band, some people like to paint the internal bit as well. I actually painted the whole thing just to highlight the colouring on this one. So I'm just going to swipe across there again with this nice sized brush. Allows me to do this band pretty quickly. Now, like in this case, if I've gone down onto the stone ever so slightly, using my trusty thing, a clean brush with a decent amount of liquid in it, you can actually just push away any mistakes you make. The paint underneath isn't porous at this point, so it is when it's dry you can just wipe off the paint if it's quick enough, if it's still wet. So you know, I came down onto the stone like that, but I got rid of it with a clean brush. So always have a clean brush around to pick up on those happy little accidents, as Bob Ross would say. Okay, so again, I'm not going to stress about making this absolutely perfect because this isn't the final one, but I am going to wipe that all the way around. And now we have the burnished areas ready to take the copper effect. So we're going to give that a couple of seconds. I'm going to use this brush a couple of times tonight. So tonight, it's like it's the evening, but it's not, depending where you are in the world. There we go. We're going to clean that one out. Okay, so next up is we have this nickel oxide. I'm probably saying that wrong. Apologies to the Games Workshop fans out there for getting the colour wrong. This is a really kind of liquidy paint. I know it's quite an odd thing to say. Most paints are quite thick and you have to actually water them down to do it. This one is actually just a liquid that you use straight out of the bottle. So as you can see, if you can see that on the thing, it's a really kind of like pastel-y green colour, and at first glance it looks like it's going to do too much and cover up too much, and this is where the trickery of what we're actually doing is going to come in. Let's get that brush back again, make sure it's clean and not super dry. You want to make sure the brush is kind of flexible at this point. And what we're going to do, we're literally just going to go straight into the oxide, have some on the paint, and we're going to drag it all over. Now this looks really strange when you first do this, and trust me, it makes it look like you go, oh my god, you're ruining the miniature, but that isn't how it is. Once you've done a little area like that, you can just take your finger or a piece of cloth or a piece of towel, and you're pulling down. So if you think about how rust and metal weathers, and how copper kind of like just leaves itself this oxide effect in the recesses, all of a sudden you've gone from cover this in bright green to just having the green left in the recesses of the miniature that you're doing. So let's make sure we get a good amount of liquid all the way around the edge, over the whole thing. Now I tried this just doing it into the recesses, and it doesn't look as effective. Literally putting it across the whole area like this, and then using your finger to wipe it off again, it just leaves the copper effect, the copper tone, or the oxide tone I should say, in there in the recesses and all hidden in a way like that. So again, way easier than I first thought it was going to be. I was watching videos and all sorts in this because I kind of avoided it for many years, but it now is a technique I'm going to use on all sorts of things. I can see this being really good on statues, on buildings, if you're having church roofs or if you're having any kind of scenery items and things like that. So there we go. Okay, so we're going to go all the way around, and now all of a sudden you can see how we got the effect on this one in 2 quick steps, one colour on that. And then we'll do a quick splash across this one because it should be plenty now. Again, this looks like it's covered it up too much. And then what we do is it doesn't matter if it goes onto the stone ever so slightly because the oxide effect can go down onto the stone. I'm just going to take my finger, I'm going to pull down and across inside so I get the other thing like that. Now all of a sudden we've got this oxide effect hidden into the recesses, and it just looks like the actual metal has eroded over time and changed over time from just the straight flat bronze to this really nice effect of the metal. Okay, so obviously making sure that's perfect before you move on, and obviously fingers not so much. We are going to do one last step on this before we will go over to the mid level of the version of this figure. I've done a couple of them. So what we want to do is we want to get between this and this. Now getting to this green isn't easy. There are many stages you could do in terms of base coats and layering and highlighting. So what I'll probably do is some kind of base colour. It doesn't really matter. Is I'll take one of these. This is a brand new paint that I haven't even opened yet. How good is that? So I obviously didn't use this one first time around. But it doesn't really matter. What we're doing is we're actually looking for a lighter colour to give us a base coat for this one. So we'll take this, and again it could be a bone colour, it could be a yellow colour, it could be anything. And what we want to do is just get rid of this black. If you try and paint any kind of brighter colour, translucent colour over black, you will spend forever trying to come up with enough layers of that colour to actually cover and look vibrant. So what we're going to do is we're just going to come around the hues like that, and again it doesn't matter what the final finish is because we're painting over this 2 or 3 times before we do it, but automatically you can see this colour, because I've chosen one that's got quite a strong pigment in it, is going to cover the black and give us a nice base colour for the ooze. I keep calling it ooze, it's probably slime. Or it might actually just be somebody's dinner. I'm not sure in the Cloudspire universe who it is that would eat out of something this size. Maybe one of the Brawnen or something, they stole it and make their lunch in it. But apparently I'm talking rubbish. I don't have an earpiece in, but I can just tell that I'm talking rubbish. It's fine. It's fine. I talk rubbish when I do this when I'm at home. So Rob, I know I don't do this on my lunch break, but when I do it, yes, I do talk to myself a lot. Okay, so that is now given us a really strong light base coat for what is going to become a far brighter green. So what ordinarily I would do at this stage is let that dry for a good amount of time and work on something else. If I'm doing 5 of these or 6 of these in a row, however many are in the box set, it's 6. Got to get that right. I'd be working on all 6 of them, so by the time I get to the 6th one, the first one will be dry enough for me to be able to re-engage with it, and it be you can layer the paint on top. Because I'm only doing 1, if I start painting green on top of that, it will become this horrible gaudy mess that nobody wants to see. So here's one we've got earlier. That again, I've done the stages of the dry brushing of the stone, the metal, and then the copper effect. And in this one, I think I actually did it even lighter, and I put an ink wash on it because I wanted to see where the natural flow of the sculpted liquid was, and I can see some of the darker areas pooling around. So that was literally just an almost white with an ink wash over the top of it to give me the nice base coat for the green. So I'll do a couple of the greens on top, and then I'll move to the last one, and we can move on to the second one. So here we are. We're going to take this nice strong, it's called Bright Green. This one's from the Wargames Foundry, who are a British company who do historical minis and a whole bunch of fantasy stuff, and their range of paints is fantastic. I'm actually going to do what a lot of people wouldn't do, is just take it straight from the pot and use this as the palette. There is literally no reason for me to use the paint palette for this because I'm putting so much on and spreading it around, and now it gives me, you can all of a sudden see how well the green, again, it's still a little bit translucent, so there you do need a couple of layers on this, but you can see how bright the green is compared to if you did it over the bottom of the black part of the mini. So I can use this. If I take the same green and put it on this one and put it over there, and it's not a big blob, you can see how dark and scratchy that looks in terms of its colour, whereas if it's over the lighter one, you do that. So that's the reason for doing that. We're going to go all around. I am not at my normal painting chair, so I'm painting at a very odd angle, and I'm trying not to lean over and hunch over because that would make for bad filming, and I don't want to do that. So forgive me if I'm holding this at a funny angle. There we go, all the way around there. I do like this green. So, and obviously at this point, when it comes to fantasy miniatures and coming up with your own aspects of things, you could do this any colour you wanted. If you wanted an orange slime, or if you wanted to keep it in theme and you want it to be Neuroran and you wanted it bright blue, you could still have an almost liquefied version of the sauce coming out of the top of a cauldron for a Neuroran Halloween. I'm sure those drift go around being all spooky at Halloween time. I think if Ryan is still in chat, I would love to hear his take on the actual canon lore of Halloween in Cloudspire, because I think I may have just added it, which is fine. There we go. Okay, so super fast, rushing through a base colour, and now we've got this. So this isn't going to be the final colour. Obviously, we want to get brighter and brighter. So what we're going to do is take a tiny bit of this one, and then I like mixing in with the next one, which is bright green B. And again, a bit of this, and mix them up, and you've got this nice brighter version of the same colour. What I could do at this point is mix in all kinds of different... I tried a neon, and there is actually some neon in the highlight on this one. Neon poster paints and acrylic paints, they don't tend to be great as miniature paints, but if you're mixing it for a scenic item, which I guess I would count this as a scenery item, then feel free to mix like one or two blobs into it, and we can do that. Okay, Kate says very nice, thank you. I appreciate that. At least there's at least one person watching. And Dragon Shadow says, talking to myself isn't a problem, it's when you don't get a response you should work. Oh, hang on a minute. Thanks Dragon Shadow. I appreciate that. Yeah, okay, I keep looking over my shoulder. It's fine. Everything's fine. It's Halloween. Okay, so again, we're going to go with layering upon layering upon layering. Now, the reason a lot of miniatures, you thin down and water down the paint. So I really want to point out this is not how you paint 28mm miniatures with cloth and small amounts of detail. You do not go straight from the pot, straight to the miniature with a big brush, although you can if you really want to. In that case, you would water them down, and you actually want the paint to be like a milk consistency. And that is because you don't want to hide the detail. You don't want one brush stroke to get rid of an eye socket or a nose or a mouth or something like that. So the thinner the paint, the better. And you just layer it up, layer upon layer upon layer. Now I'm doing the exact opposite on this item. One, because it's a scenic item and you want to kind of do it, but also I want a really flat, slimy finish to it. So I want it to be kind of, almost viscous in its appearance. So there we go. So here we go round. Now you can see how much brighter that paint is going down around there. Okay, so I'm not going to go through every single layer because this is where I just had fun and I was just adding bits of paint and bits of paint and bits of paint and just went through layer by layer by layer. You can add other colours like a bone colour. He says if it comes out. There we go. And again, once this is dry and you've moved around a few, this gives like a really pastel-y highlight colour. So when I'm coming around and I'm doing like a highlight on an area, I can swish it around. And what I'm trying to do with this kind of action is I'm using the brush to simulate like the motion of the liquid. I know it seems crazy to try and put motion into a static figure, but you really can feel how a cauldron would be bubbling and broiling away. And you don't want it to be so flat that it looks like a piece of plasticine. You want it to have some kind of movement. So the highlights and the brush strokes are all in this circular around the bubbles, and then all of a sudden it starts to come together and you can see the movement in the cauldron around like that. There we go. So you can start to see where the lighter areas are on the higher bits. And so I would keep adding lighter colours and go lighter and lighter and lighter until I'm happy kind of with the bubble hitting the light. There's a bit more light coming in from this way and a bit here. And eventually you can see the layers of the lighter slime coming through very quickly. You start doing that and the motion around of the bubbles. Now that looks fine once you start to layer it up and make it a bit more consistent, but it doesn't have the slimy, oozy finish that we want. So we're going to go on to the final one, and there's one last bit that I want to do a second time to show you how I got the finish for the shine. So this is a very matte stone and a very matte finish on the metal. But the slime and the ooze itself should definitely be super slimy and gory. So we've got something which is just a gloss varnish in a bottle. Give it a good shake and make sure it comes out because it exploded the first time I used it. There we go. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a super clean brush because we don't want any paint pigment in this whatsoever. So we're going to take this and we just take some of this gloss varnish and we're just putting it over the whole thing. Now you'll see there's a slight kind of like blue tint to it. That absolutely does not stay in any way, shape or form. So we want to put gloss varnish all over the area that we want to stay shiny. And you can layer this up. So this one already had one layer of gloss varnish on it. And I always like to do a second one if I want it like super shiny. And then what this is going to do is it's going to dry and the blue tint is going to disappear and it's just going to leave almost like a hard protective layer of see-through gloss varnish. So this is just like when you do laminated floors or whatever and you put a varnish over the whole thing. This has no stain in the varnish, it just goes through. So there we go. That, I think, is all the steps that I took to do this one, from dry brushing of the stone, a couple of layers, the metal banding and the copper finish, and then layering up the green into that one. Okay, so there we have a bubbling cauldron of Neuroran spooky Halloweenness. We're going to go through the next one. Let's go to the airs one next because it's got some similar techniques on it that I can whiz through because we've already seen them. And then we'll go on to the zombie grove tender last. So what we're looking for this one, this is and again I've done this way more stylized than I normally would do it for source lighting and things like that. So source lighting is when you take a part of a model or miniature and project a source of light from a particular point onto the rest of the miniature. Usually in the fantasy world that could be, you know, some kind of flame or a crystal, or it could be any kind of glow from a scanner. In our case we're actually going to do the light from a doorway, and again this is a very crude, I've done really like harsh version of it to make sure it shows up on camera. So you could do this a lot more subtly and a lot more graded as you do in your technique. But in this one, we wanted a really dark, overgrown spire with some light shining out the doorway that cascades onto the outer side of the building. So again, it's Halloween, so we're going to start with black. Here we are with the air spire, and we're not going to worry too much about all the individual details at this point. We just want to give it the sense that it is made of stone. So again, we're going to get some of the grey, the Games Workshop Mechanite grey, and we don't need a lot at all. So here we are. What I'm actually going to do is turn this over so I can not go into the green. And I've got a new dry brush this time because I want it to be utterly dry. Whenever you're dry brushing, the most important thing is this is super dry. So again, I'm going to get rid of 80%, 90% of the paint, and I'm just going to drag it down over it. And on every single side, give it some kind of semblance of a colour that isn't just black. He says throwing it away. There we go. Hold on to your miniature hard when you're dry brushing. So here we go. I'll catch some of the recesses and leave the recesses, catch the highlights, and go over the top. And this hardly looks like I'm doing anything at all, but what it actually does is it sets the scene for why it's so dark everywhere. And what it is that's actually being highlighted. So here we are, we've got some grey bricks just being caught and some grey highlights on that. So this is an air spire, at night, and we're just going to add some colours to it, some bright sparks. So there we go. So that's literally, I don't want to do any more than that. Okay, so one of the other techniques we've already done, so I can fly through it. In fact, we've still got some paint in the palette. Is the bronze finish on the statues. So again, take a good sized brush, go up away from the castle because we don't want the bronze to go into the actual stonework. And we're just catching these. Do love these. This little I think it's is it a hummingbird holding some kind of scroll. And then the columns, just to add a bit of an extra colour, we're going to do those in the bronze as well. So again, this is over black, so it's should be a dark finish. There we go. And I'm not too stressed about doing it on the inside of the columns, because obviously that's going to be in the shadows. And then coming down around on the outside. Okay, so there we go. We have there the bronzed columns on there, and we won't worry about the hatchery for now. So again, we're going to use the oxide. You've already seen this technique, so I'll just fly through it. Let's make sure we have a clean brush for this, because again, this doesn't have any other pigment in it. I'm hoping that the bronze is dry enough for me to be able to do it. So let's get another brush. Many brushes. So again, we're going to get some of this, and we're just going to take it down. Again, it looks like you're putting on too much to begin with, but you can always dab it away. So depending on how bright you want and how I guess it's a form of rusting, but the oxidization of the metal again. So it's all down there, and you're taking your finger and you're almost wiping it off. You can see some of it coming straight off there. So what you don't want to do is turn the whole thing into this green. What you want to do is leave yourself with a really dark coppered version of what it is that we're painting. So here we go, on to the statues, and again, when you first put it on, it looks like it just made the whole thing like this milky colour. And it's all down to how much you now want to take off. So pulling down with my finger, I wouldn't use a cotton ball or anything else in this, because you don't want it to absorb. You don't want the whatever it is you're wiping with to go down into the recesses and pull out the ink. What you want it to do is actually literally just scrape it off. I haven't found it. I did try other tools, but I didn't find anything better than using my finger. So there we go. So now you can see straight away that is now like a nice weathered bronze effect thing. I just love how easy this technique is. Okay, so let's close that up. And then the next step we're going to do is just getting ready for the highlights. So again, we're doing this super exaggerated, just so it shows up on camera. What we want to do is have the light coming out from the doorway, cascading out, and it's only going to hit. Light only goes in a straight line, obviously, so it's only going to hit the areas that are in a straight line from that. So you can use the back of the brush, and you can see from the middle of that, it's just going to be all around there. It is going to hit the light. And light loses its coloration and things like that the further away it goes. Now, I don't know the technical term, and I'm hoping there's a scientist in there. Yes, Diplodocus, it is very fun and relaxing, so thank you. Hey, here's one for you. Is it Diplodocus or is it Diplodocus? Because I grew up being told it was Diplodocus, but now I believe it's Diplodocus. Anyway, I thought you were going to write the answer there, but no, our stage manager has no help whatsoever with the answer for that question. So what were we doing? We're talking about light. If there are any quantum scientists, people, I don't know, anybody, rocket engineers that want to tell me about light and what the loss of different portions of the light over distance is, because I have no idea. I probably know it, but I don't know off the top of my head. Right, so we are going to go with a smaller brush this time. This brush is so small I haven't even used it. And we are going to get some of the white. I'm going to go for a new palette. This isn't wet paint, don't worry. So you can see in the overview. Yes, Kanjay Studios, I did lick the paintbrush. It's a bad habit, I've said this to people. So I get a point on my paintbrushes with using my mouth. It is perhaps a bad habit, but I am glad that at least 73 people pointed out to me every time I do it on camera. So here we are. So now we have the air spire at night. It's all dark, and somebody switches on the light inside the doorway. So what we're looking for here is just to start with a white base. Again, the same reason we did a base coat for the green before we came out to the glow of the ooze. We're going to start with a white in this area. Doesn't have to be perfect. This whole area is going to be lighter. And there we go. Down inside the area. So this is where the actual light is coming on. So ping, light is on. What we now want to do is we want to pull away from that across and just catch the areas that are coming directly from the light source. So what we're going to do is pull away through into the doorway. There we go. All the doors around there. And obviously the door step is going to have... I can't actually hold it at the right angle for the camera and whilst I paint it, so I'll just tug it up afterwards. There we go, so now we're on the doorstep. But obviously the light hits more than that as it goes further away. What is the taintiest colour of paint, says somebody. I've got to work out who that is that's asked that now. I think that is the Ghillie monster. And if I was to say the tastiest colour of paint is probably ochre. Don't know why. My favourite paint. Okay, so we're pulling away from the doorway, and now we're going and we're hitting this statue. So the actual arches, the arches there, this is the column. There we go, words, people, words. So I want to hit the column, and I want to kind of like pull out the light across there at the base of the column. And this is all the areas that the light is going to hit. Now the reason this is so important is, again, the colours that we're going to put on afterwards don't want to be directly over black. They want to actually show up as light, a light source. So we're going to pull it away, and then it will come out in the direct direction from there. I'm just going to put it out, nice thin strokes. Going to catch the end. If you ever feel like you've done it too hard, you can just, again, pull your finger over it. Makes a useful tool in the paint box. And there we go. Okay, so again, this is exaggerated for hopefully so it will show up on the camera. You can do these as light or as little as you want, as light as you want. Ha, that's a funny joke. Okay, there we go. So now we have this light source, and at the moment it is just white. That is obviously not how we want to represent the light source in this case. So what I would do now is wait for this to completely dry. So I'm going to move on to one that I've got to this stage already. I've actually done the hatchery and the nest in brown with an ink as well, because I thought that would be quite nice to do it. So now you can see here I've pulled the white away, and we're going to look at this light source from the outside in. So when light travels, it loses its brightness, and we are going to start with a tiny bit of red. We're just going to go for a bit of a dark red finish. So on the furthest reaches of where the light is going, I'm going to take a tiny bit of this. Now this is where you want the paint to be a consistency closer to milk. You're not going to do it straight out, otherwise you're just putting a blob of paint onto the mini. There we go. So now we've got a really nice thing. So we're now just pulling away a bit more of the red. There we go. Keeping the point. We'll go around. What we're doing is we're going over the white light marks and the highlight marks that we did first, and leaving everything else. So this is us representing the furthest reaches of the light, and it's lost all its white and its yellow pigment, and it's now just got some red pigment left. So there we go. And now obviously we go down through the colour spectrum step by step, back towards white through yellow. So depending on what kind of light source you want it to be, I would obviously have a range of colours that you go from almost a white light up through to whatever colour it is. But whatever it is, the transition needs to be nice and gradual. So now we're going to look at it's like an orange. There we go, and that can scrape up into the red as well, obviously. But what we're trying to do is be quite consistent with the distance away from the light source with what is red and what is orange and what is yellow. So there we go. It is more entertaining than just painting. Thank you, Kate. I appreciate that. I don't do stand-up. We leave that to Ghillie. Ghillie likes to think that he's the funniest, so we let him do all the stand-up. And if he isn't listening to this, then that's his own fault for not responding. So you heard it here first. This is starting to be strange. Yes, thank you. It is quite strange. Okay, so we've gone through the orange light now. What we're going to do next is go on to the yellow light. I'm actually just going to take some blob of yellow paint. And again, you could do this in far more stages than I'm doing right now. You can take your time and layer it up and make it. If you type in source lighting miniatures on Google, you will get 1,000 beautiful minis. Excuse me, that'll show you kind of what I'm talking about on a far more micro scale than this. So, okay, so let's get some yellow. Again, we're going to go a bit closer. We're not going to go out to the furthest reaches this time because we don't want the light to extend that far and that bright. And we're going to go down through. Not too much, there we go. Down the column. Okay, the tiniest bit at this level. So now we're almost down towards the doorway itself. Did we learn in school not to eat paint, or was that glue? That's a great question. That is a great question. And Chip Theory Games says that they love what I'm doing, so thank you. I appreciate that. I think I might not do operations anymore, and I might just do a daily painting channel. Painting with Ches. There we go. Okay, so we're now down into the actual light source itself. So we want this to be a really quite vibrant yellow. I can imagine all sorts of different lights being used at this point, but our one has got a really striking, strong yellow tone to it. So I'm doing this quite quickly, but you can actually see I'm just going over where the white highlights were before we started adding the colour pigment. Yay, Heather's watching. Everybody say hello to Heather. Okay, so here we go, all the way around, pulling through, making sure the highlights are done, and now you can see again statement that this is done in a kind of a way more stylized, outrageous way to show up on the camera rather than the soft, smoother transition that you probably want to try and have fun with when you're at home. But now we're into the doorway itself. We want to have a nice soft colour, and this is where you can just play around with how you want it to actually work. What I tend to do is kind of do like a flat colour inside, and then look at perhaps taking some of the orange and watering it right down and kind of like making our own, maybe with a bit of yellow, making our own ink. So really, really watered down version of the colour we're going for. What I want to do is actually just like put that into the corners, because then we can see that perhaps there's a shadow of a doorway or something like that. So this is where it really starts to come together and kind of looks like something other than just a big flat area of colour. See, I almost put my paintbrush into my drinking water. That would have been funny because I need it. Okay, we're good to go. Okay, so I've picked up the final one. In the only difference between this one and the medium stage I was doing is I've done more and softer layers in between. I've also got, and I'm going to show you on the medium one again, we've got other ways of making this spooky. So we've turned on the lights in the whole house. So we're actually going to use, this one's called Poison Ivy. You can have basing materials on the bases of other ones or things like that, but this one actually is a really simple way of adding, again, texture and spookiness and darkness to your thing. So this actually just gets pulled apart. I'm going to try not to get it anywhere. So this is like a wire. It's like a plastic wire, almost like a fishing wire, and it's covered in like a grass-like ivy finish. And what we're going to do is we're going to take it onto different areas. Yes, Halloween-themed minis, you know it. There we go. Boyd is obviously going to do Halloween-themed minis, aren't you, Boyd? Yes, Boyd. Okay, so tiny little throwaway glue. Again, thank you for our backstage team for getting me that at the very last minute, because I didn't bring any super glue with me. And what we're going to do is we're going to take some of this and we're going to push it down into the glued areas and try not to get it stuck on your fingers. So I'm going to take the back end of a brush and push it onto there. This is the time where you don't want to use your finger. If those of you who don't know, super glue was invented to stick skin back together with skin, and it works in very humid environments. Don't use your finger, they will stick. It is way better at sticking skin together than anything else. Okay, so you can all of a sudden see there, the ivy stops it from being a flat edge to giving it some depth and giving it to that. So you can work the ivy around, and here we are. We've worked the ivy around down around this one, inside the archway on that one to stop it looking so flat on the inside of the shadow, and around on this side as well. So we've now got this overgrown, finished Ayers Spire at night at Halloween. Maybe I should have done the glow from that one. Okay, so we're going to move on to. Is it where we eat the glue? No, well, no. Sorry, FX Xavier, we don't eat glue. Right, we're going to move on to my favourite one actually, which is the zombified Grove Tender one. Now this is a really, really simple paint job. So what we've got here, again, we're looking at the final one. We have blood oozing out of some of the pores. We have a nice pallid finish to the flesh. I actually painted the tree in very normal, non-spooky colours because I wanted this to be a spooky monster moving in the world that we know and love. So this one, the way we get here is from a base coat of green. Now this is, again, it starts pallid, but it's got no depth to it. So the first thing we're going to do is add some depth. And this one is a contrast paint called Plague Bearer Flesh. Now what better than Plague Bearer Flesh to make our zombie base colour? So what we're going to do is we're going to take it straight out of the pot and we're just going to push it over the whole thing, and this gives us depth to what we're doing. You can see how much greener, and it's very strange because this is a green undercoat spray, you can see how much greener it starts us down this one. Now, the reason I've got this as one stage is because it's one of the most important stages. What we're not doing is we're not like just changing the colour for the sake of it. We actually want to leave in the recesses some of the other parts of the ink. Any ink wash you do, it's supposed to go inside the recesses rather than just sit on top and be the final colour. So here we go, around the face. And here we go, down the leg, up the other arm. We don't need to worry about the tree because we're going to paint the tree in a second. In fact, I might just jump to the middle one. It's that simple. I showed you some of the painting techniques for some of the base colours on this one in the last painting show last month, or 2 months ago now. I can't even remember when we started this. Feels like years. All I know is that I'm looking forward to 2020 actually starting. Okay, here we go. So that is, I'm not going to finish it perfectly because I'm going to move quickly on to the next technique. But as you can see from the difference in this foot and the rest of this model, we have added an ink wash that is kind of given it depth, gone into the cracks and crevices and given us a really strong colour to be able to use as the base of this. Rather than super dry pallid where we have to actually layer on the shadows and the highlights and whatever, we're going to give ourselves the strong colour with all the strong shadows. One thing I did realise when I was painting this first time as well is that the top is way better if you just give it a nice flat finish. So again, instead of being pallid and flat, it's nice and done. There, right, that now takes a good hour to dry before you would paint anything on top of it. So I'm not going to wait for that. I'm going to move straight on to the second step, which is this one. So what we've added at this stage is we have let the ink dry. We have painted using a brown, leather brown paint for the tree trunk and what's called angel green, but you can use a forest green, you can use anything you want as the tree tops. So that was done to paint the tree. I then used a bone colour. This one I think is wool. I mixed it with a bit of white for some of the protruding bones. In fact, if I remember rightly, it wasn't my first Grove Tender spy called Protruding Roots. I think this one could be Protruding Bones. They're part of the same family. It's great. And then we use an ink wash. So here we have the strong ink. So again, Army Painter uses 3 main tones of shade outside of the colours of ink. So they do soft tone, which is a light brown, strong tone, which is a dark brown, and dark tone, which is a black ink. The reason that's really important is because whether or not you want a brown pigment in the ink or not. So in this case, we really do want a brown pigment because we want it on a tree trunk and we want it on the protruding bones, which is like that. Okay, so now we're ready to take this from this in a couple of easy steps. So moving the base ones aside, we're going to take what I was happily showing around the office this morning, which is Blood for the Blood God. Yes, that is the name of a paint. And here we are. It is a technique, an effect paint, rather than kind of just a regular acrylic paint. What kind of brush do I want to use? Let's do it quickly. So we're going to use a number 2. This is the monster brush. Hey, that's pretty cool. So now what you can see from this liquid, like you can see it's really gooey. It almost looks like the makeup paint that you use to put blood on at Halloween around people's faces. But in this case, we're going to do it with this one. So what we're trying to get here is blood in the recesses without it being covered all over. I think I actually have one of my first rendition of this one. Hopefully you can see that on camera right now. But you can see that I went really heavy with the blood. The idea was I was just going to cover it in gore and then highlight the skin over the top of the gore. And although that probably would have worked out really well, I actually tried it again. Secondary has a kind of just hidden in the recesses. I felt like it just felt a little bit better. So what I'm going to do here is just blob it into the recesses. And again, we're using the old finger technique, which is we're going to pull it away. So it takes way too long and doesn't look right if you just try and use a fine detail brush and put it in. It's far better to put it on and use your finger to rub it down. It gives a way better like oozing feel to the blood as it's coming out of every single pore, and it comes down all the blood, every single open wound that this poor grove tender has. There we go. So now you can see we're going to come around to this side, and this is where I love using the texture of the model as it's there. I'm not making up any kind of extra bits. I'm not trying to force painted highlights and force things onto this model. I'm just using the bits that are there and then getting rid of the excess, and then all of a sudden we've got lots of weird, horrible, gross, oozing, bloody grove tender bits. There we go. Okay, so again, we don't need to go through every single one of these, but I want to get the majority of them. Let's use that one. Here we go. So again, you just go around and you're using all the different crevices on the model. There's a lot of texture hidden in what would have been the bark of this creature, summoned to fight with as a spire for the grove tender faction. There we go. Okay, so we're going to get most of those. We're not going to stress about doing all of them because again we've got the final one just there. So you can see by going around the entire model and again just pulling away the excess on it, you've got yourself now this nice finished bloody areas. I think there's a couple more bits. Okay, what we're going to do is, as I'm finishing this one, we're going to do a giveaway for all 3 of the finished spires. Now, I'm not going to paint all 30 of them in an inbox for you, but all 3 of the finished spires, so 1 Airs, 1 Neuroran, and 1 Grove Tender spire. We're going to do a giveaway to the same person. What I want everybody out there to do, and I know there's at least one person in there, is write spooky into chat anytime in the next 10 or 15 minutes whilst we're finishing. If you've written spooky into chat, we will choose one of you at random at the end of this to contact and get your address and get those sent to you. And again, if you want to use them in the game, great. If you want to give them as presents, then do that as well. If you want to throw them at passers-by, I don't recommend it. But I can't stop you. Okay, so what we're going to do next is we're going to do some of the highlighting and the finishing details that give us the awesome finish of what is a pallid undead. So super bright green, and this was by happenstance that I got this last time. Super bright green, tiny little brush. I'm going to put a dot in there for his eye, and I'm going to stretch it out a little bit along the eye. So there we go. And again on this side. Ba-doop-doo. Okay, so now we have 2 super glowy eyes. If you can't do that particularly well, if you're your hands and your technique doesn't allow you to finish that with a tiny little brush, don't worry about it if it's in the eye socket as a whole. What you can do is you can actually put a tiny dab of an ink wash over the top of it, and it will create the eye line again, and will go into the crevices of that eye socket. So don't stress too much about getting just the eyeball, pupil, whatever. Okay, so next up we have the pallid flesh itself. So what we're going to do here, we're actually going to use a couple of mixed colours. I do have one that I've got that's called necrotic flesh hiding around somewhere, but I didn't bring it with me, so bad me. What we're going to do is we're going to take like a bone colour, and we're going to try and find one clean palette. There we go. We're going to take a bone colour. That's a bone or a washed out eggshell or a white or something like that. Is always a good base for kind of any kind of highlight. So there we go. Tiny bit of white if I need to make it lighter. And then what we're going to do is pick one of the greens. Okay, we're going to put a drop of green in that. And what we're trying to achieve is a lighter version. So super pallid. That's much too minty. Okay, so we're going to take one of this. And this is where you can just play around with whatever kind of rotting flesh finish you want on your mini. So I'm just going to play around between this, which is the green and the white and the flesh, and then this one, which is kind of like a sandy brown colour in there, and mix a bit more until I go backwards and forwards until I'm happy with what I see as a rotting flesh finish. I think we're almost getting there. There we go. I think that is pretty cool. Okay, so it is quite green. Again, we've got a darker green base coat, but we've got a super light finish on that. So I'm going to use the brush that I used to mix it because we want to do a very light coat. And what we're doing now is we're actually highlighting everything that isn't the inside the rotting areas. So again, I use the side of my brush. This isn't dry brushing where I'm going side to side. This is almost like I call it wet brushing. I think I said this last time. I don't know what the technique is called, but it's almost using the side of your brush to transfer paint onto the highlighted areas. It's only going to catch any of the raised areas for the highlights. So what we're going to do is just go all the way around the mini. You can see what is actually quite a harsh contrast between the depth of the skin, like the rotting underside, the bloody viscous mass of the pores coming out, and then the dried pallid skin suit that is left over on this rotting thing. So here we go. So do like that. We'll get a bit more on there, and we'll come back down round. Again, if you find yourself where you just go, oh my god, that's terrible, if you're quick enough, you just take it off like that. So painting, you should not stress about getting every single paint stroke correct, but actually just concentrate on getting paint on the model, working towards the finish that you want, and then correcting any little minor mistakes you might have as you go around through it. So there we go. We're going to pull that across the head and across the arm. It's really important that this has highlighted face. And again, because it's now consistent across the whole model, it doesn't look so harsh. It now just looks like the finish of the skin. So again, it's coming together. You're blending the model between the layers and between the finishes. And you can go as many layers as you want. If you want this to be super white and washed out, you can. If at any point you think, you know what, I've done a bit too much, you can always go back and add a thin down ink wash and add the different bits. So I think that is pretty much done. Okay, so let's go back over what we've done again today. Get these out of the way. So we used 2-part epoxy to sculpt on some extra details onto this. Again, this is starting to come dry, so I said it takes a couple of hours. You really can't paint it straight away. So this is actually still malleable. If you keep this in the fridge, it'll stay malleable for days and days. It won't actually cure. So we can see here that we can do that with the bubbles. We've then undercoated it, done some dry brushing on the stone and the metal, and we gave ourselves a light base. We went from the base, we started to layer up the green, and we started to highlight where the liquid was moving, and really layering up how bright and vibrant we wanted all of that. And then finally, after, obviously forgot about the rust oxide as well on there as well. We saw how easy that liquid technique was. But then the final one, this is actually almost dry. You could probably put another coat on there. This is super glossy finish on the ooze, and now we have one of those. So that was the first one. The second one was the airs. Again, we wanted it to be dark. We wanted this to be a nighttime spooky version. It's a real light dry brush of a dark grey, and that was the only base coat we gave it. We then bronzed out the statues because we wanted them to have some colour and some form. Again, very dry, very limited palette. And then we gave ourselves a base coat for what was next going to be the highlights of the source light. We moved on to starting to layer from the darkest colour. So if this was a blue light, you would have like a dark blue on the outside, and you'd go through a lighter blue until it got to the white of the source in the middle. And we do that gradually, layering it up, working towards the centre, in which case this is the final one where we've added some of the spookier effects. Is ivy spooky? Hey. It makes it look more run down. I couldn't get cobwebs, not in this miniature form. So I could have added cobwebs, but here we've added almost like an ink wash to define the light on the inside as well. And if you wanted, you could even have almost like a white ball or a glowing ball as to what the actual light source was. I want this to be inside the building now. So that was that one. And then the third one, we started from an undercoat of a flat green, added an ink wash, which gives it all the depth and all the contrast and the layers. We then moved on to, I can't even see which one's the second one, which was painting on the details and inking those to give those some depth as well. And then we painted all the rotting areas, the red and the oozing blood coming out of the pores in that, using finger again to pull down so it doesn't just look like this one. And then we started highlighting. We came up with our own pallid flesh colour, which gives us the top layer, the driest, darkest, lightest skin, on the zombie. And with the details of the eyes and the teeth and any other the bits, the bones that you want sticking out, you then have a finished spooky zombie to add to your game table. And again, whether or not, obviously you wouldn't put one of those on it, it still looks good as a usable one, even if it is a bloody darker version of it. Okay, so I don't think there are any last minute questions, but I think we're almost time to wrap up. I have, in fact, I'm going to take this. So from Josh's brain, I actually had to rip this off his head, if you remember from the earlier video. Out of Josh's brain directly is one of the people that put the word spooky into chat, so thank you very much for all of you that did that. And the winner is Sebastian. So thank you, Sebastian. We'll be in contact with you. We'll DM you with details of how to get hold of your address. We'll get it wrapped up. I will pack them very, very nice and carefully. And we will get them in the post to you in the next couple of days. So here we are again at the end of another Minis painting episode. I can't wait for what they give us next time. If they want a Christmas one, I might just cover everything in fake snow and be done with it. No, I'm joking. So yeah, any suggestions from you guys about what it is we could do with the Minis or any other Minis around our games that we could paint up and get done, let us know. We're always there. Support is always there if you want to send random questions on Facebook through. They'll come through as a ticket and get to the right person. So thank you for joining in. Thank you for being there in chat. Heather, Sebastian, Boyd, Kate, everybody else that's asked questions, thank you, and we'll see you again very soon.
All right, so that does it. That is episode 2 of CTGTV. It feels like we've been doing this for years already, doesn't it? No, not really. So again, the plan with CTGTV is to have a monthly episode. However, we've already said that on occasion we may break that mold for various reasons, and already here in October we are ready to break that pattern. And the reason for that is that late October, of course, is when typically Essen Spiel is happening, and sadly, due to COVID and everything else, that is not happening this year in person, and we will not be leaving for Germany in a couple weeks, which really bums us out. However, we do still want to do something to celebrate Essen, and though it will not be the actual weekend specifically of Essen Digital, we are doing a special Essen episode of CTGTV, and so the date for that will be October 16th. So stay tuned for that. It will be happening. We'll be launching live at 11 o'clock in the 11 o'clock Central, just like we did for this episode and like we do for all CTG TV episodes. So some of the things that you can look forward to on that, we are going to be talking more about Burncycle, and that is probably what you'll be most excited to see. We will be giving some more details probably about how the network side of the game works a little bit, and hopefully some more concrete details about gameplay. We will have Anthony LeTourneau drawing live, and we're going to kind of recreate what we did for the Splice Dice Kickstarter campaign, but we're going to be doing it with Anthony live. So there's going to be a survey that you will be able to take live as Anthony is drawing. We're going to take you on kind of a little mini Too Many Bones adventure, and he's going to be drawing a spliced baddie live on video, and I would imagine that this baddie will probably make its way into a promo pack sometime in the future. Not this year's promo pack, because we don't have time to design skills and other things for however it turns out. However, I'm sure we'll put this baddie to good use in the future. There will be a new playthrough with Ricky Royal of Too Many Bones creating his own tyrant using Splice and Dice. We've got some Trove Chest coverage. We've got some more Cloudspire coverage. You'll be able to see a little bit more Horizon's Wrath and Uprising gameplay, as well as our resident Cloudspire playtesting expert Salem Scott doing just a basic overview of like what makes all the different factions in Cloudspire really unique. So a whole bunch of more content for you coming up here on the 16th. And then, of course, don't forget to mark your calendars for November 10th, which is the launch of the Burncycle Kickstarter. And as we get closer and closer to that, we will be sharing more and more and more about Burncycle. We're so excited for how that's coming together. So, on behalf of all of us here at CTG and CTG TV, which is not a separate company, but I just made it sound like it is, on behalf of all of us here at Chip Theory, thanks for watching, and we will see you again in just 10 short days. Take care.